2, 1, and we are in. How are you doing today, Jim?
Great. Good to see you, Ryan.
Good to see you too. I'm very glad we stuck with it. I know you canceled a couple of weeks ago, and then I think I canceled on you once. So we finally made it. We made it happen. So what are we going to talk about today?
Septemics.
Septemics. And dare I ask what Septemics is?
But let me say one sentence by way of introduction, which will take us into that. I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics, and published it in the book Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
And how long ago was that?
The book was published about 3.5 years ago.
And how long did it take you to come up with this new philosophy?
Well, it sort of grew out of my work, so I had been sort of doing research and development on it for decades, till I finally realized I had found something big. And then I worked on the book itself for 25 years.
25 years, wow.
Yes.
That's staying power.
And I'll tell you why. First, I had to discover the phenomena. This is entirely new stuff. After I discovered the phenomena, then I had to use it to craft a workable philosophic system. Now, as an engineer, I'm only interested in results and facts.
Fair enough.
So I had to create something that would work all the time for every person.
Right, like a proper test methodology.
Right. And that took 20 years. But the most time-consuming aspect of it was expressing this in a way that would make sense to the average reader. And I know he succeeded at that because some version of this book has existed now for 28.5 years. So I've been seeing people get results on this for a long time.
Well, that's exciting. And I think also, too, finding the right language to reach the widest audience is really important, because a lot of these philosophical ideas and a lot of these phenomenons, if you don't use the right language, it just goes over people's heads.
That's right. Yeah. And my intention from the beginning was that this would be a book that would help the general population. And I know I succeeded at crafting that because I've been seeing the results. People get this. When they look at this material, they say, wow, I see this. So the way you experience this, it's like the first time you see the periodic table, or the Pythagorean theorem, or Newton's 3 laws of motion. You see and you say, oh, yeah, this makes sense. So people get it right away.
That's good. And this is the Septemics.
Septemics, right.
Yeah. So let's go back a bit, and then we'll come back to Septemics. So
right.
Where are you from originally?
Originally, I'm from New York City.
Okay. And what was it like growing up in New York City?
At the time, it was fantastic.
Yeah. This is before they cleaned it up. When it was a bit more wild, right?
It was a very different place.
Yeah.
It was really a great place to grow up. At that time, it was the greatest city in the world. So I loved it. In fact, I didn't think of myself as an American. I thought of myself as a New Yorker.
Yeah, I've heard that, right? You don't really have too much in common with the rest of the United States when you're a New Yorker.
Right.
Yeah.
So, then it started to deteriorate in the mid-'60s. So eventually, California sort of flourished, and eventually I moved to Southern California.
Okay.
And I was there for a long time. And now I live in Arizona.
That's great. So what did you study in school? Like, I'm trying to understand a little bit about who you are and how you came into Septemics and figuring out this new philosophical way.
Okay, well, the story really starts at age 16 when I was accepted into engineering school.
That's young.
Yes. And, of course, at the time, I thought I would be engineering physical things like airfoils or motors or electrons. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche.
Wow. Okay.
because it's the area of greatest unknown, of greatest mystery. More importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the son, don't understand the boss, don't understand the producer, don't understand somebody running for office. So this goes in all directions.
Yeah.
So to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer.
That's wild. You know, it's funny. I always think like people are spending so much money going into space and building, you know, amazing feats of engineering, but no one's spending any time figuring out what's going on in our own brains, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So if we exterminate one another by biological, chemical, or nuclear weapons, the rest of it doesn't matter.
Right.
So as I was working with my clients, which went on for 40 years, I came to realize not only did my clients improve, but I could predict the outcome of the session.
Okay, hold on. So you go into engineering school at 16 and you're out at 20 for your degree, right? And then at 20, you have this revelation that you think you want to spend the rest of your life engineering the human mind.
Right.
That's a huge thing at 20 to figure out.
Well, the dates are a little bit off because I started engineering school at 17, and I graduated at 22.
Okay.
But by then, while I was an undergraduate, I had already started studying alternative subjects.
Okay, interesting.
So, because what happened was, I was such a good student that by the time I was about 20, I pretty much knew everything in the mainstream. In other words, I knew all the main subjects: mathematics, science, history, literature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And you were bored by that?
I wasn't bored by it, but what I realized is there are vast gaping holes in between all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Because despite knowing all this material, we still don't understand most of what goes on with people.
Mm-hmm.
At least at the time. There has been some change since then. So then I started delving into various alternative subjects to sort of figure out what's in between, what's in the twilight zone. What is this really all about?
And what subjects did you take? Like what? Like if someone out there is like, "Ooh, I want to figure out what's in between." Also, what would you take? What starts to generate those ideas?
Well, there's a variety of alternative subjects that I studied, a whole bunch of different ones, and I don't usually name them because people don't really understand them and don't really know what they are, so it doesn't really tell them anything. But
would it be something like astrology, for example? Like,
well, that was part of it,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Buddhism, a variety of different things.
Yeah, world religions are very telling, actually, because even if you don't believe in organized religion, understanding all the different organized religions and their backgrounds and where they came from, I think does help the human psyche a little bit, or help you understand it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So by the time I had my bachelor's degree, see, I had already delved into a lot of these alternative subjects. And so I sort of knew that there's a lot going on that's not even discussed in the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what I did is I used Socratic dialogue aided by biofeedback as an engineer to help my clients. I don't know if you're aware of this, but every time you think a thought, the electromagnetic field around your body changes.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes in predictable ways.
Okay.
So I learned how to use the biofeedback not only to find the areas of travail on the person, but what really was going on there. In other words, let's say we see that the meter shows mother as an item for this guy, right? But what is it going on? Is he upset about her? Is he worried about her? Is he angry about her? See, these are different things, and you sort of have to know what it is in order to lead the person to deal with it. So the biofeedback really helped me zero in on the client. So this was very fast.
Mm-hmm. But this isn't psychology or you didn't go into psychology or psychiatry or anything like that. You kind of created your own path.
I would say what I did was eclectic.
Mm-hmm.
I did study psychology, among other things. I am a polymathic intellectual. So my areas of expertise cover about 24 different subjects. And in my mind, eventually they all blended together into one understanding of the world that apparently no one else had. So I was able to work with my clients, and they would improve fairly quickly. And so I started to realize that I could predict the outcome of the session. So what that told me was there's something predictable here.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not tell this to anyone, but I made notes. And after a while, I came to realize that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed. And as a result of the session, he would go up to the next level.
Okay, so hold on. So these clients are coming to you. So what are the clients coming to you with? What's their
You name it.
Depression, anxiety, panic attacks? Like anything to do with the human psyche?
Anything.
Yeah.
Anything. Drinking problems, drug problems, marital problems, money problems, violence problems, you name it.
Sounds like everyone could be your client.
Well, only people who want to improve themselves, and there's a lot of people who don't.
That's very true, yes.
So the guy has to be motivated to seek help and to be willing to have help.
Okay.
So that, that kind of narrows it down. And then, of course, he has to be able to pay for it, too.
Mm-hmm.
So this went on for years, where I would write down what I observed in the sessions. And by 1995, I had about 32 scales that I had just observed. In other words, the guy would be at this level, and he'd go to this level. Now, this thing about going to the predicted level, in my mind, he didn't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
That happened thousands and thousands of times. And every time it did, it verified my hypothesis.
So multiple clients were coming to you with issues, and you were helping them work through them, and their path to progress became predictable?
Yes.
Okay.
Hundreds of clients of every description, every age, every gender. The only thing they really all had in common is that they spoke English.
Okay.
Not necessarily that was their first language, but so I just kept writing all this down. And what would happen is I would see this phenomenon in the session. And then when I went outside the session, there it would be. I'd see two people talking at a bank, same phenomenon. I'd see two people on TV, same phenomenon. So I realized there's something specific. There's some phenomena here that I'm just observing because of my work.
Mm-hmm. You're the only one spending enough time actually trying to figure it out, but it's happening everywhere.
Right. And I think my career led me to see it, but also I think because of my polymathic qualifications, I was able to evaluate it and see it for what it was. In other words, I was able to see there's something here.
It was almost like you were able to quantify or use mathematics to understand human emotion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in about 3 minutes, I'll tell you exactly how that happened.
Great.
So, by 95, I had about 32 scales of varying lengths between 3 and 7 levels. Okay. There's about 32 scales. So, and I would see these verified day after day. Sometimes I'd see them verified multiple times in the same session. So in other words, the guy would improve on one axis, and then we'd change the subject, and he'd improve on another axis. But I had the data, and he didn't know the data. So, also in 95, one day I was pondering a difficult client. I realized that this person was at a level on one of these scales that I had not previously observed. So I had this 6-level scale that by then I absolutely knew axiomatically was correct, because I had been using it for decades and it always worked the way I thought it would. But then I realized, there's another level here. Now, when I saw this level, it was obvious to me where to insert it in the scale. When I inserted the 7th level into the 6th level scale, it manifested mathematically. So it went from being a scale to a plane. In other words, all of these data jumped out at me. Now, the whole point of mathematics is that you start with an equation or a formula, and you coax data out of it. That is what mathematics is. That's how Einstein found E equals mc squared.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody in the math and physics community knows exactly how he did it, exactly what steps he took. There's no mystery to that. So when I saw this data jumping out at me, I said, whoa, there's mathematics embedded in this. Because when I saw this plane of data, this body of data that jumped out from the scale, I saw that this fit together like a Chinese puzzle. And each different way that it fit together was mathematical. I have to realize I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute.
And it's almost like you were taking notes with all these clients and you were mathematically categorizing all of their reactions and emotions, right? Yeah.
I was just writing down what I observed.
Right. And but then you created your scale out of those observations.
Right.
Yeah. Not a lot of people have an analytic brain that is working at a high enough level to be able to do that.
This was engineering to me.
Yeah.
So I'm a dyed-in-the-wool engineer. You know, when they gave me aptitude tests, 3 of the top 4 levels were 3 different types of engineering. Well, by then I had already been accepted as an engineering school. I said, well, duh, I'm going to the right place. So that's how I think. Now, then I said, whatever this is, this has to be natural law because it has mathematics embedded in it. And anything that has mathematics embedded in it is natural law, like the Fibonacci sequence, for example. So then I said, wait a minute. I wonder how many of these other scales are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way, because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So then I said, okay, I'm going to look into this. And knowing what I was looking for, I studied these other scales, and in a short period of time, each of them went to 7 levels, if it wasn't already at 7. And when it did, it manifested mathematically.
So you were seeing this across multiple disciplines.
Multiple axes. So then I said, I have 32 scales. At the time it was 32. Now it's 35. And they all are 7 levels, and they all have mathematics. This looks like a new subject to me because I went to school for 28 years. So I didn't see anything like this anywhere. So then I thought, this could really help people. And my next thought was, I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as a human development engineer, to helping them by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out so people can use it.
I like that. You just used a term I liked, human development engineer. That's very interesting. I don't think I've ever heard anyone coin that phrase before.
Right. That's what I was. And people would sort of say, well, you know, what do you do? Is it counseling? No, it's not counseling. It's engineering. Counseling suggests you're telling the person something. And I told the person very little, even when I was asked, you think I should stay with this woman? Well, what do you think? So I was not there to give information. I was there to lead the person to his own epiphany.
By asking questions?
Right, by asking the right question, which the biofeedback directed me to.
Interesting. So the clients would come to you looking for help to be bioengineered, and you would make notes and you would have your scales and understand your levels, but you wouldn't let the clients know that. And you would probably also be able to figure out what they needed to hear, but you also wouldn't tell them that. But you ask questions so that they would figure it out on their own.
That's right.
Okay, that's interesting.
So if you read the Socratic dialogues, which were written by Plato, there are many of them, you'll see that Socrates is shown as talking to people in Athens 2,600 years ago in such a way as to lead them to a realization. Okay, so that's what I was doing, just aided by 20th century electronics. And the electronics was not only in the biofeedback, it was in my mind, because I understood science and engineering and mathematics, as well as all these other subjects. So then I said, well, I could really help people with this, so I'm going to have to write a book. I didn't particularly want to do that. I mean, I was happy with what I was doing. So the first draft of the book was finished in December of 95. So I sent it in a transcript form to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively. I was kind of surprised at how positive the responses were. So it was, everyone had a slightly different take on it, but it was like, whoa, you found something here, that type of thing.
And what was in that first manuscript?
It was the original version of the book. It was kind of a primitive version of Septemics. So then I knew this is exactly what I think it is. It's a new subject that could really help people. Because you have to realize, people get this. This is not obscure because it's natural law. Do you remember the first time you saw the Pythagorean theorem?
Yes, I do.
And you say, oh, yeah, I see how this works. Or the periodic table. Oh, yeah, hydrogen is here, helium's here, lithium comes next. It all makes sense vertically and horizontally.
Math and chemistry were two of my worst subjects, but I do remember briefly,
Right.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, they were two of my best subjects. So anyway, it's like that. So if you just open this book and just stick it in front of somebody who can read English, he'll look at it and he'll say, yeah, I see. Because it's natural law. It's easy to get. It's not counterintuitive. Now, there are little bits and pieces of it that may be counterintuitive to specific persons because they have some idea about what it's supposed to be. But when people actually study it, they see it. So...
Now you're going to walk me through it?
No. So now let me tell you. So that's when, at that point, I spent the next 25 years writing the book.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to realize, as an engineer, I'm only interested in results and facts. To engineering, opinions and beliefs are utterly irrelevant.
I wish the rest of the world still felt like that.
And to tell you the truth, I'm like that with everything. I'm a fact-based person.
Yeah.
You know, don't tell me what you feel or what you believe. Tell me what happened. You know, I mean, is this guy 6'2" or is he 5'8"? Tell me. You know, what is the fact? That's what I want to know. I can figure it out after that. So, you have to realize first I had to discover the phenomena, and I kind of already told you how that was going to happen, how it did happen, just by observing my clients and making notes. But I did find 3 more scales as I was writing the book.
One question, just
Yes.
as a slight tangent. What exactly were you observing in your clients? Like what facial tics, rhythm of voice, breathing, you know, like what were you catching from them that was
Right.
that was giving you the signals to help you build this scale and these levels?
Right. So the client comes in, right? And the first thing I would do is a long interview. No charge for that. That's just so I have data. So by the time we had the interview, and this was done on biofeedback, so I was seeing the reactions that I was getting. See, like, tell me about your family. Nothing happens. Tell me about your job. Meter goes boom. Ah.
Trigger point.
Right.
Yeah.
Then I say, tell me more about your job. Tell me about your boss. Boom. You see? So I'm zeroing this in. Oh, my boss, Mr. Smith. Boom. And most interestingly, the person would get the exact same reaction on this item. So when he said mother, it would get a certain read. And when I said mother, the exact same read would appear.
And are you getting these reads visually, or did
Yes,
you have
reader.
Looking at a EKG or something? Like, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're collecting bio information. So you're collecting their heart rate and their.
Actually, I'm just collecting the electronic change. I'm not doing anything with heart rate.
Okay.
So, because you have to realize electronics, that we're talking about the speed of light, right? So this is instantaneous. So I became very adept at this as I did it because I was very interested in helping my clients. So I could really help the guy unwrap. So a guy comes in and he says, I have a terrible problem with my wife. She wants a divorce. How long has this been going on? 5 years. 20 minutes later, he has a big realization because I can steer right into it. Wow! Now I can see my wife is just like my mother. See, and his relationship with his wife just got better because he understands now what's going on. So that just kept happening over and over and over and over. So the clients were really happy with this. So
you were almost solving their problems too quickly, right? That's the you're killing the golden goose. You're helping your clients too fast instead of letting it drag on for years.
There's some truth to that, yes. But see, I was always interested in helping people. I was just born that way. And I've been helping people my whole life. This was just another way to help people. But it was an efficient way to help people. Didn't rely on my belief, my opinion, my intuition, or anything like that. You know, the meter moves. So, going from having these 32 scales, and I told you how I got them, to having a workable philosophic system took 20 years. Because you have to realize, simply having a scale is not enough. You have to have a whole body of data for somebody to look at it and say, oh, I see how this fits together. This goes here, and this goes here, and therefore they get it right away. So.
But that data, sorry to interrupt you, that data is not in ones and zeros, right? That's just in your notes. So how do you take your written word or your notes and put them into a scale and know where that all, like, you have to have such an analytic mind to even think about trying to do that.
And I had to have the ability to write, which I did. So you have to realize that 20 years to develop the subject. So now I knew this works. But the hardest part, or I should say the most time-consuming part, was expressing it in a way that would make sense to people, to the average person.
That's very hard for an engineer to do.
Right. It wasn't hard for me because I was a polymath. And just to give you an example, when I was 17, I was writing poetry in Latin for fun. So I was very good at all subjects. I was just a very good student. I loved to learn. In fact, I can still remember the exact moment when I first discovered that some children didn't like school. That was a shock to me. I was standing at the chalkboard with another kid doing division. And he said something that I didn't really understand. I said, wait a minute, you mean you don't like school? He said, no, I hate school. I can still remember. That was like, whoa, that was an eye-opener. Some people don't like school. See, I loved school. I was enthused. I started school when I was 3, and I've been involved in education my entire life to the present date because I love it. So I was motivated. Yippee, today I get to learn about Abraham Lincoln. That's sort of who I was. So I learned all these subjects, and eventually, of course, when I was young, history was one thing, and political science was another thing, and psychology. But now it's all one big thing in my mind. There's no dividing line between these.
I think that's I think that's very interesting, because I think our society values speciality
Yes,
much more than it's useful, and I think what's missing is people who are holistically educated in many subjects and are able to attack a problem from many different angles.
exactly.
Yeah.
Specialization.
Yeah. There's too much of that, and I think now there's too much stuff falling between the cracks.
That's right.
Yeah.
So because of my polymathic abilities, things didn't fall between the cracks for me. So let me explain this now. A few people have said to me, what book is your book like? And I have to say, having gone to school for 28 years, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before. But each of these 35 scales is expressed in what you could call a spreadsheet or a table. In other words, it's a page like the periodic table of elements. And each of these 35 subjects has its own periodic table. So the periodic table is obviously for elements. But these are periodic tables for 35 areas of human development, human phenomena. If you like, I can tell you what the 35 areas are, and then you know exactly what subject matter is covered in the book.
I would like that, actually.
Okay. Rather than trying.
Yeah, well, this is wonderful. I think the audience would love to go deeper into this with you.
Well, if you go to my website, it's easy to go.
It's easy.
It's all there.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell you the names of. Now, 24 of these are what I call individual scales, meaning they apply primarily to an individual person. These are the individual scales. The scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And there are 11 group scales, and these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics.
Oh, you left the dirtiest one for last. Okay, so within all of these scales, there's 7 levels within each of these scales, and based on a conversation that you can have with a client, by only asking them questions and reading their responses, you're able to put them into these various scales, and you also be able to understand what level within the scale they're sitting at.
Yes, but I don't even need to do that.
That's fucking wild.
I can figure this out just listening to people talk that don't even know.
Right.
Like I could be at the bank standing in line, right? And 2 guys behind me are talking. And I can spot what level one of those guys is at on one of the scales. Just from what he says. Because the truth is, people tell you their levels.
Yeah, you just have to look for the tells, right? The signs, the signals.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you know this, you know what you're looking for. Comes right out of the person's mouth. So anytime you know a person well, it doesn't necessarily even have to be somebody you know personally. you can spot persons on these scales. For example, I know the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and many of the presidents prior who I studied, such as Washington and Lincoln and Jefferson. It's not subtle. Now, how long it takes you, what sort of observation you have to make, that varies because people are different. Like, for example, with Alexander Hamilton, it was crystal clear to me pretty early on that he was at level 2 on the scale of basic purposes. It was just obvious to me.
Okay. So Alexander Hamilton, obviously deceased. How were you able to classify him on your levels, on your scales? Were you just reading his writing, his book, or like can you read someone's writing and figure it out, or do they have to be sitting in front of you?
They don't have to be sitting in front of me. Obviously, I never met Washington or Jefferson.
Yeah.
Or
I didn't want to make
their levels on that scale.
I didn't want to make the assumption.
Right. Not that old. So, anyway, we know a lot about those men, right? There are hundreds and hundreds of books about Washington, about Jefferson, about Hamilton. There's all kinds of videos, documentaries, and being a scholarly person, I study these people. In fact, between the ages of 10 and about 15, just on my own, I was reading the biographies of many famous people. Hundreds of Ulysses S. Grant, Abe Lincoln, Louis Pasteur, I was, and seeing what are these people like? What are the facts about them? What do they have to say? And as I said, people tell you their levels. If you just know the material and listen, they will tell you. And I'll tell you an example of how simple this is. When Obama ran for president, most of us had no idea who he was.
Yeah, he came out of nowhere.
He had only been in the Senate for 2 years. Now, the people in Illinois knew who he was.
Chicago.
Because they sent him there. But for the rest of us in the other 49 states, who is this guy with this funny name who's running for president? I said, I better find out. So I conducted a study of him septemically. And I was able to determine, took a few weeks, listening to his speeches, watching his body language, to figure out his basic purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what could possibly be more important to know about a person than his basic purpose? It's what he's trying to do all the time, whether he's successful or not.
Something that would be very useful to know for someone who is voting for the president of the United States.
Exactly. So that told me, do I want to vote for this guy or not? Now, I'm not going to tell you what I discovered, because that would be unethical. If he were deceased, I might tell you. In the book, I talk about famous people, and I actually give levels because they're deceased, so I'm not doing any harm to them. But as far as anybody who's living, I tell everyone who asks me or who will listen, never give the level of any living person on any scale. Even if you're 100% sure you're correct, because every time a person correctly finds a level, whether it's for himself or another, he has a realization. He says, oh, level 5. Now I see why I can't get along with Gertrude.
What's the difference? So, for example, scale of basic purposes, right? That's number 1 on your list.
Mm-hmm.
So within that scale of basic purposes, you have 7 levels.
That's right.
So what is a character trait of someone at level 1 within the scale of basic purposes? And then what is someone's character trait at level 7?
Okay. Level 1, I call that person the saint. That person's basic purpose is transcendence. So these are people you find in communes, monasteries, rectories, ashrams. Some of them are hermits. These people are not interested in anything in the material world. So if you study the great spiritual leaders, which I did, you can see that's what drove them. Now, depending on their belief system or their education, they would articulate it in a different way. For instance, if you have a saint who's a Catholic, and I've known some, he'll say he wants to go to heaven and become an angel. If you talk to a Buddhist, he'll say he wants to attain nirvana.
Mm-hmm.
See? You talk to a Hindu, he'll say he wants to resolve his karma. But they're all trying to transcend.
And that's level 1.
That's level 1. Level 7. The basic purpose of a person at level 7 is to destroy. Now you might say, why would somebody have that? Well, the good news is there aren't too many of those. But there are Hitler is one of them. Pyle is another one. So I'll give you some context on this. I'm a serious student of military science. And military science has been around for thousands of years. Okay? It's very well developed and codified. There's hundreds of things we know you should do and not do. Okay? So when I was studying World War II, and Hitler, as the commander-in-chief, was running the German war, he would do things, and I said, why would he do that? That's not what we learn in military science. That's wrong. Now, Hitler made 6 or 8 catastrophic mistakes in pursuing World War II. And every time I would come across one of them, I'd say, why would he do that? And we know all about this. For example, Hermann Goering told Hitler, if the Soviets get in the war, we will lose.
Many people did, yeah.
But Goering was number 2.
Yeah.
It's not like some guy he didn't know. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Because they couldn't win a war on 2 fronts.
Right. Not only that, the character of the Russians, it's said of a Russian soldier knows how to die. So 10,000 Russians would go against 1,000 Nazis. Mm. The Nazis would wipe them out and lose maybe 200 men. Then another 10,000 would come. They'd lose another 200 men. So even though the Russians lost 20 million people in the war, they still prevailed. And they had this gigantic land army. So I thought, wait a minute, Hitler's got a non-aggression pact signed with Stalin. Why would he violate that and attack them? And the answer to all of these questions is because he was destructive. He wasn't just destructive to the Allies, he was destructive to the Wehrmacht. He was destructive to his own nation. He was destructive to his own generals. He was just a destructive person.
Just trying to break shit all the time.
Right.
And that's level 7.
That's level 7.
Okay.
So that's when I discovered that, after I figured out this material, and I studied Hitler, it was not hard for me to figure out that he was at this level, because when you study the man, and of course there are thousands of books about him and all kinds of experts, which I've studied, I could see, yeah, he's destructive. And that explains why he did all those dopey things. I mean, his generals all told him, if the Americans get in the war, we'll lose, because their industrial might surpasses all of Europe combined. That's exactly what happened. He declared war gratuitously against the United States. He didn't have to do that.
No.
And if he didn't, Roosevelt would have had a hell of a time getting the Americans to fight the Germans, because this was not something that the Americans wanted. The Congress didn't want to go to war. It was an isolationist country, protected by 2 vast oceans. So by Hitler declaring war against the United States, Roosevelt said, you see? And then he was able to do what he wanted to do, which was go to Europe and fight them.
Yeah. So if someone is level 7 in their basic purpose, There's no reasoning with them. There's no appeasement. There's no negotiating. They're just going to be completely kind of like where some people might say Vladimir Putin is today, where he's just kind of destroying everything around him.
Well, I'm not going to comment because he's a living person.
That's true. Fair enough.
But Pol Pot, definitely destructive. And if you study these people, if you know the person and you know the book, it's not hard to figure this out. Because some version of this book has existed for 28 and a half years. So I've been watching people use this. People get this. You don't have to be a college graduate to understand this. If you can read English reasonably well and you follow the instructions in the book, you have to go through it the way you would go through a math book, a physics book, a chemistry book to explain it, you get it. So usually, let me tell you what normally happens when somebody looks at this. So let's say you've got a buddy who's having marital problems, right? Your friend Bob. Every time you talk to him, he says, I don't know what I'm going to do about Elaine. She's driving me crazy. She's doing drugs again. I think she's cheating on me. She doesn't clean the house, right? And you're listening to this for 6 months. So finally you say, Bob, come here, let me show you something. And you open the book to the scale of relationships. And you say, look at this. Now, he knows he's in a dysfunctional relationship, even if he doesn't use that word, right? So he's going to look at this and he's going to say, you mean there's a scale of relationships? And you say, yes, there are only 7 levels. This relationship that you've been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on this scale? I guarantee you he's going to want to know that because you're opening a door for him. He's going to say, Now, what's going to happen is, in a matter of seconds, 15, 20, 25 seconds, he's going to find a bracket. At first blush, he's going to look at it and say, well, I can see that level 1, 2, and 3 have nothing to do with us because we're having a lot of trouble, and that's the top of the scale.
So it's a 5 or 6 or a 7.
Yes, it's got to be 4, 5, 6, 7. So you see, that's progress. He's narrowed it down in seconds. So then you say to him, look, why don't you just go ahead and read the text, and then you can get it exactly. He's going to want to do that. And you can help him as a tutor, right? Explaining things, helping him. What does this word mean, and so forth. So he goes, and then he comes back, and he looks at it and says, well, now that I read it, I can see we're level 5. No wonder we're having trouble. That's almost near the bottom of the scale. See? And he will have an epiphany. He'll say, yeah, that explains X, Y, and Z, and it'll be specific.
And then what?
And then he just got smarter about this problem. So he is now better able to deal with it.
Because he can at least identify it.
Right. And you could say to him then, you could move this relationship up to level 4. He'll say, you can? Yeah, it tells you in the book how to do that. Oh, level 4, that's better. So this could go a couple of ways. He might say, can I borrow your book? I want to show this to Elaine, right? Or he might say, I'm going to get a copy of this and show this to Elaine, right? Or he might say, why am I wasting my time on this? This is a dog relationship. It's been terrible. It's down at the bottom there. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm done with her. Now, you might think that he's going to be bummed out by that.
Not at all.
He will not be.
Yeah.
He will be relieved. He will say, Ryan, thank you. Thank you for showing me this. I feel much better about this. So then you say, take a look at this, and you turn to the scale of sexuality. And he'll say, you mean there's a scale of sexuality? And you'll say, yes, everybody is at one of these 7 levels. You don't have to tell me if you don't want, but for your own illumination, where are you on this? He's going to want to know that because he's having trouble. He looks at it, he's going to find a bracket. He's going to say something like, well, I can see right away, it's not 6 or 7. We have nothing to do with that. So he sees he's got it down to 5 now. So they say, well, why don't you read it and then you can get it exactly. So he reads it, you help him, he comes back. He says, well, I can see now that I read this, I'm at level 4. And he might also say, And I can see that Elaine is at level 5. No wonder we're having trouble. Those are incompatible levels. If you look at those at that scale, it is patently obvious that some of those levels are incompatible.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll say, this can't possibly work unless I bring her up from 5 to 4, and then we'll both be at 4. See, he could try to do that, but he might not want to, or she might not want to. He might say, I've got this book here, and it's got some good stuff in it. She might say, take a hike.
You never know.
Right. It depends on the person.
So from having just been educated about this now, and I'm trying to catch up to you, obviously, it seems like this is a great tool for identifying feelings, problems, conflicts, etc. It's a great identifier of self, right?
And other.
But then what can you do to fix it other than trying to move yourself on the scales? Like, where does, does healing become part of it? Like, how does someone make a change that isn't moving from one level to another? Maybe there's something more in depth or complicated that needs to be done. I don't know.
Fixing it is going up to the next level.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's what was happening with my clients for 40 years. The guy would go up to the next level. I'd say, wait a minute. This other guy had the same thing and he went to the same level. See, I'm writing it down for 40 years. So I tell you in the book, there's a whole section on how to use it to move yourself to a higher level. And there's another whole section on how to use it to move another person to a higher level. It's slightly different. It's very specific.
So would you consider, all of this scale that you've created, if you were number one at every level in this scale, in all of your categories, that you would be like a happy person?
I would say that's an understatement. But let me tell you this.
You'd be walking on air.
I already know, because remember, I've been working with this most of my life, right? And this is in my mind. I mean, I just looked at a person and I'm calculating this already. It's just like, if I know a lot about botany. So I went to a garden and said, hydrangeas, tulips, roses, nasturtiums, chrysanthemums. See, it's just like that. I don't have any trouble identifying a chrysanthemum. Every chrysanthemum is unique, but I can always identify them and differentiate them from a rose. So that's how this is with me for people, right? So this has solved the gradient problem. And let me tell you what I mean by that. For 6,000 years that we know of, maybe longer, people have had problems, dilemmas, situations, difficulties, etc., and not been able to do anything.
Mostly caused by other people.
Well, whatever the cause is.
Right.
And the reason is always because they don't know the gradient. Every good coach, teacher, therapist, facilitator, etc. in the world knows that human development must be done on a gradient. You cannot make an Olympic athlete out of a couch potato. There are too many intervening steps. You might get him to go from being a couch potato to being a normal person, see? And then maybe you can get him to be maybe a weekend athlete, you see? And then maybe you can get him to being a serious athlete. And then maybe you can get him into a competition. But you see, there's levels he's got to go.
You can't just become Michael Phelps.
Right. So, for example, I've worked as a trainer. So if some guy comes to me and says, Jim, I'm 100 pounds overweight. I don't know what to do. I can't fix this. Will you train me? I say, okay, I'll train you. So I would need to find the gradient. So, for example, after talking to him, I might say to him, do you think you could walk 1 mile every morning? He'd probably say, yeah, I think I could do that. Say, okay, I want you to walk 1 mile every morning, and at the end of the week, we'll talk again. So at the end of the week, I talk to him, I say, how did you do? If he says to me, this is tough, I say, all right, keep doing it. If he said, piece of cake, I can do this now. It was hard the first couple of days, but now I got it. I'd say, great, let's go to 2 miles. See, it's finding the gradient. So that's what I did for all of my clients all the time. Find the gradient. So these levels are the gradients.
But no one else has quantified it like this before.
Well, let me put it to you this way. There are people who know bits and pieces of this.
In too many different subjects that aren't connected.
Right. So you'll find some guy and he discovers 2 levels on one of these scales and he becomes a specialist in that. That's all he knows. But this is 35 scales with 7 levels each. There's 245 different levels, each of which had to be ascertained, verified, and then expressed in a way that would make sense to people.
And then it took 25 years to make a book out of it.
That's why it took 25 years to do that.
That people could read and understand.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because here's what happened. I sent out the first version. I told you about that. I get this great feedback. So then I rewrote it. I said, okay, this is for real. So I used all of my skills as a writer, as a scholar, to make this. And then I sent it out to colleagues and students and clients and so forth. And I got feedback. Here, look at this. Tell me what you think. And I would get things. Well, I didn't really understand what you meant here. And I would make a note. So I kept rewriting it for 25 years until I got it down to a point where I could see it was foolproof. Or at least it was as good as it could be. Because a person has to be willing to read a book. He has to be willing to look up some words. He has to be willing to look at himself, look at others. Some people don't want to do that.
No, that's very true.
So you might have some guy whose mother is a sociopath. He doesn't want to hear that. See? I could look at her and see that like that.
But he's blind to it because he's put his blinders on for that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because his emotion gets in the way. See? So he doesn't want to deal with it. So you have to realize it is an established fact in the mental health profession that psychopaths and sociopaths do not make progress in therapy. We know that because the lights are on but nobody's home. That's why they're sociopaths and psychopaths. Narcissists make progress, but very slowly.
That's why therapists make so much money in LA.
Right. So if you get some guy, there was a movie and a TV series about a guy in organized crime who goes for therapy. That's a complete fantasy. I mean, it's conceivable he might be there the first day, but he's not going to get anywhere because of who he is. And I know exactly why. When a person is at or near the top of any scale, it's because he's insightful in that area. When a person is at or near the bottom of any scale, it's because he lacks insight in that area.
And hasn't tried to understand or improve.
Well, whether or not he's tried, he lacks insight.
Insight being the first step. Insight and understanding being the first step.
So look, Eddie Van Halen, rest in peace, was at level 2, possibly even level 1 on the scale of human ability. Level 2 is virtuoso. Clearly he was a virtuoso. The 1 is genius. He might even be a genius. I never met the man. I didn't make a study of him. I just know this from listening to his records. Okay? So that's very high. Most people never get to that level on that scale. But he was a heavy drug abuser. And eventually he died at a fairly young age, probably because of that. He came close to wiping out many times. Okay? So on some other scales, like perhaps the scale of equanimity, he was at or near the bottom. That's why he needed the drugs.
To escape.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
See, an equanimitous person doesn't need drugs, doesn't need alcohol. Okay? And so if you study the scale of equanimity, which is very important, you can see, okay, this guy, like take Jackie Gleason. He was a chain smoker. He was a drunk. He was a glutton. He was a womanizer. Clearly, he was near the bottom of the scale of equanimity.
That's so damn funny.
Yes, I love the guy. I love him. He's a riot. And I've seen his shows maybe 10 times, and they still make me laugh. But he was not high on the scale of equanimity. And we know why. He had serious emotional problems. His father left when he was a kid and never came back. Okay, and it was a big deal for him. And he didn't do anything to fix that, see? So he fixed it with chain smoking and with alcohol and with sex. And see, that's like his remedy.
Mm-hmm. Or even just masking it. Yeah.
So he was either at level 4 or 5 on the scale of equanimity. Now, on the scale of human ability, he was probably at level 2. Virtuoso. I mean, CBS gave him $7 million circa 1952.
That was when $7 million was really $7 million.
For $1,000, 1952. Okay?
Yeah.
So they saw this guy is for real, and we're going to make a fortune out of him, and we're going to $7 million you sign with us, right? And then they did the Honeymooners, and the rest is history. So it became a household word because they could see somebody there was really smart. You could see this guy had it. He knew how to make people laugh.
But he had his demons.
Right. So perfect example of a person who was high on one skill, low on another skill. Most of us are high on some skills, low on other skills.
Yeah, that seems very natural. Like not all of us have mastered all parts of our personality. Yeah.
And I could give you historical examples that are indisputable. Okay? So you have to realize every person is at some level on every scale. You.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you can ignore that data, but you do so at your own detriment. It's much smarter to use it.
So how would you use it beyond trying to level up?
Okay, leveling up is what people have been trying to do for 6,000 years. So I give all kinds of examples in the book, historical examples and analogies, okay, of a guy who comes in at a certain level and works his way up. You know, maybe he gets to level 2. Maybe he doesn't get to level. So that's what success is. Success is moving up these scales. So each of these scales is a roadmap for success because it takes any one of these 35 subjects, like let's say a scale of memory. There's 7 levels of memory, okay? As you come up this, your memory gets better and better and better. So if you pick yourself up at level 5, that's where you are. If you try seriously, you can get to level 4. If you try to get to level 1, 2, or 3, you will definitely fail because it's too steep a gradient.
Now, what would be the levels that would exist in the scale of memory? Because, you know, is it like the quality of your memory or like the things you can remember, like short-term memory, like, because I can't remember things from when I was 3 years old. Right. So does that mean I'm like level 5 on the scale of memory?
Well, we could get into a discussion of the scale of memory, and I don't object to that. But every one of these scales is unique. So we could spend 10 hours discussing the scale of memory because you're going to say, really? See, because when you find your level, it's going to blow your mind. You're going to say, now I see what's going on here.
Huh?
Then you can move yourself up to the next level. And you're going to be thinking about people. Oh, yeah, that's why this guy can't do this and this guy can. So I don't really want to go into that because it's somewhat beyond the scope of this discussion.
Yeah, let's keep it a little bit more high level.
Right.
Yeah.
But let me tell you in a general way how this is beneficial. Because when you talk about a specific person on a specific scale, it's very specific. The guy finds the level on, for example, the scale of allegiance. He says, I see. In my marriage, I'm at level 3. I have dropped down from a higher level. Because think about this. When you get married, everybody goes into marriage to love, honor, and obey.
So everyone's at level 1 at the beginning of the marriage.
Actually, it's probably level 2.
Okay.
But point is, 50% of marriages in the United States end in divorce. What happened? They went down the scale of allegiance. Anytime a relationship deteriorates, it doesn't matter, marital, parent-child, a partner in a business, you have people like Martin and Lewis who broke up, Abbott and Costello broke up. They went down the scale. And so look, the guy is happily married, right? So he starts having arguments with his wife. She starts yelling at him. So he says, I'm sick of this, right? And he goes and he cheats on her, right? He's got a mistress now. Well, that's a decay of allegiance, right? He's not keeping his word. He promised to forsake all others. And now he's cheating on her, right? So he's at a lower level on that scale.
Yeah.
So you could get this guy in, show him this, and he'll say, I see. I've gone down to level 4. No wonder we're getting ready to divorce one another. See? And then you can tell him you can move yourself back up to level 3. And he'll look at us like, yeah, that's better than level 4. See?
It might not save his marriage, though.
It might. Because we don't know what's going on with the other.
That's right, yeah.
Because he might have to sit down with his better half and say, take a look at this. See? Now, if she's a person who can deal with her own foibles and weaknesses, she might say, yeah, I can see I've fallen down to level 3, And that opens the way for them to save this thing because they can move it back up to level 2.
There's a path back.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you have a guy is dating a woman. They're going out for 2 years. They're talking about getting married. Wouldn't it be smart for him to know, why does this woman want to marry me? I mean, isn't that a reasonable question?
Yeah, it's very reasonable.
He doesn't have to ask her. I'm just saying, for his own illumination, just sitting there. So he might look at the scale of motivation, see? Now he knows her because he's been hanging out with her for a year or 2 years. And he sees the scale, I see the highest motivation is love. Okay, she wants to marry me because she loves me. Great. Here's a diamond ring. But maybe after he studies this, he thinks about it. He says, now that I think about it, I think she wants to marry me because I drive a Maserati.
Money.
I fly my own Learjet. I have a 60-foot yacht. I live in a $15 million condo, and I have $20 million of them. See? That's a different motivation.
Is that level 7?
That's level 4, money. There's a lot worse things than money.
Yes,
To be motivated.
Yes.
How about revenge?
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
5 goes lower than that, too. So, now, what he does with that is up to him. He might say, I don't want to be with a woman who wants my money. I want to be with somebody who loves me for myself.
Oh, that's sweet.
Which is why a lot of rich guys are quiet about their money. They don't want to tell them, yeah, I got $15 million in the bank. Because he wants to see, does she really like me? Is she really attracted to me? And then later she finds out and she says, whoopee. But he doesn't tell her right away if he's smart.
Okay. Question for you now.
Yes.
Would you consider someone to be at an enlightened level if they understood where they are at what level on all of your 35 scales, would you consider that to be like an enlightened human being?
Well, first of all, enlightenment is a matter of degree.
That's true also. Do we have a scale of enlightenment?
No. but how enlightened is enlightened?
I think everyone is, especially now. I think I really feel like there's a lot of stigma around mental health that has disappeared in the last few years. I think COVID was actually helpful for that. A lot of people suffered and were public about it, and a lot of people, as the cost of living crisis increases, we have wars all around the world. People are feeling pressure, not understanding themselves fully, trying to fix themselves. There's a lot of life coaches and people trying to help other people. So I'm just wondering, would you consider like the path to leading a better life for someone to understand themselves better, to be able to take your 35 scales and understand what level they are on each scale? Or are some scales not necessary if you understand where you are on other scales? Like, I'm just curious, like, where you see all of these 35 scales and all of these 7 levels on each scale, is that necessary information for someone to like really understand who they are and where they're going?
Let me answer that last question, because you actually posed several different questions here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The data in this book is vital for every person and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
But you have to have goals in the first place.
Well, everybody has goals. Even animals have goals. But let me explain it to you this way. If someone were to invite you to a rendezvous, you would certainly expect them to tell you the location, the time, the day, and perhaps how to get there.
What to wear?
That's not necessary, but you're going to expect that from them. Okay. Now, the data in this book is like giving you the data for the rendezvous. Think about this. It's very hard to get somewhere if you don't know where you're starting from, don't know where you're heading, and don't know how to get there. Now, this sounds idiotic.
You just described every human being on the planet.
Well, that might be an overstatement because
we're all in circles.
There are some smart people around, but there are plenty of people who do that all the time, right? Those are the people who their lives just never get anywhere. But there are other people like Elon Musk, he accomplished a lot. So he obviously had some insight on some of these scales. He kind of knew where he was, knew where he was going, knew how to get there, and you can see him. He takes up new businesses and he keeps doing it.
But you could also say that he's probably very low on the scale of, he has a very low level on the scale of allegiance because he's had like 12 children with 5 different wives.
Well, certainly with the specific women, yes. His current one, we don't know.
Right.
Maybe that's doing well, but yes, anytime a relationship deteriorates, it's always because the person goes down the scale of allegiance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, once you know the scale, it's not hard to figure out. You can see, oh yeah, he did this, now he's at 5. That's what you get. So, getting back to the analogy about the rendezvous, the whole point of this is that when you find the level, either for yourself or another, that's where you are in that axis. The next level up is where you will go if you succeed. And the next level down is where you will go if you fail. In other words, it's predictable. So, the beauty of this is, if you figure out that you're at level 4, you focus on level 3, ignore everything else. This is efficient because people are sort of going around grasping at straws. What do I do now?
Yeah, no one has a plan, but
Right.
this gives you the plan.
Right. So I'm telling you, this is the next thing up. So I have done the heavy lifting, but by figuring out what these 7 levels are across 35 axes. So if somebody's having trouble, you observe what's happening, and you figure out what scale is going to be relevant to them. So most people have kids, and most kids have trouble in school, right? So dad sees that Junior is having trouble in school. He says, Junior, come here, let me show you something. He opens the book to the scale of scholarship. Now, Junior's 13 years old. He's in junior high. He can read this book. He looks at it. He says, he knows he's a scholar. And he says, you mean there's a scale of scholarship? The dad says, yes. Where are you on this? Junior is going to want to know this because he's having trouble. See, he's already motivated because it's an issue for him. And you go through the same sequence. He'll find a bracket. He'll say, definitely not 1, 2, or 3, because that's the top of the scale and I'm having trouble. See? So he gets it down to 4. And dad says, go ahead and read the text and then you can get it exactly. And Junior is going to want to do that.
What amount of issues in the clients or patients or people that you've helped with this, what amount of them have had problems in one scale because of something in another scale? Like maybe Junior's having problems, he's a level 4 in scholarship, but it's because of something in another scale that he's also neglecting.
That's a good point. But the way you use the scale is you're either at a level or not at a level. This is engineering. It's precise. It's like your car broke down. Okay, either you have a flat tire or you don't have a flat tire.
So it's completely specific.
Right.
And isolated in some ways.
Right. So the car's not driving right. The guy said he looks, he sees he's got a flat. Okay? So now, it doesn't make any sense to open up the hood, look under the hood, and check for the water in the radiator. He gets out the spare, jacks up the car, he puts on the spare, and he drives away. Okay? That's what this is like. So, I see. So, I've known mechanics who you could drive your car into them. He'd say, leave it running. He'd listen. He'd say, oh, it's your alternator. Doesn't even have to look. He knows by the sound. Okay? And experts in all kinds of fields do this. So like when I would have people come to me for training, physical training, I would look at the guy and I could see, what is the deal with this guy? You know, because a guy could have a lot of muscle and still be overweight on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can have another guy who's got no muscle at all, it's just all flab. So it's a different solution, you see? So my job as an expert is to say, okay, this guy, I'm going to get this guy lifting weights because he's got no muscle. So just from lifting the weights, he gets definition. And he looks thinner even if he hasn't lost any weight because he's getting a physique. Another guy might have been a former football player who's out of shape now. Say he's got muscle. He's just been eating too much. So I get him walking and then jogging. See? So it's very specific. That's how these work. So whatever the reason is, you are at some level. And when you spot that level, you have an epiphany. Okay, so the guy says, oh, now I see what's going on here. Now, there is a datum in engineering that's been around a long time, at least 100 years, maybe older than that, that says 90% of finding the right answer is asking the right question. Why did Einstein find the theory of relativity and nobody else did? He asked a different question. He looked at gravity and matter, energy, space, and time in a different way. And he ran the equations. See? So why did Newton find the 3 laws of motion? He looked at it and he asked a different question. You know the famous story about he saw the apple fall from the tree, and he said, wait a minute. That's the same force that holds the moon around the earth. See, that's an insight. And from that, he got the 3 laws of motion. And then he invented calculus so we could actually calculate these things with specificity. So we're talking about 2 geniuses who asked a different question. So when you find your level, right, you're asking the right question. Where am I on this scale? See, that's the right question. Then you find it. Then, in a sense, the next level up is the right question relative to the level you're at now.
I get that, yeah.
So that is why I tell everyone, if you find the right level, number one, you'll have a realization. That's how you know you found the right level.
Mm-hmm. And then you'll know what steps to take to get to the next level.
And the next thing is the next level up. Now, what you have to do, how long it's going to take, some guys have to take a course, some guys take up religion. People do all kinds of things to improve themselves. And I'm not knocking any of those things. Whatever the guy, maybe the kid joins the Boy Scouts, because we don't really know the person. Every person is unique. So the solution is always unique. But what I do know is, if the guy finds the right level, I'm telling him what the next level up is. It's right there. And he focuses on that and he gets there.
And do you all also offer any guidance of how the steps to take to get to that next level or make those self-improvements?
It's in the book.
Okay.
For example, I talked about the scale of scholarship a minute ago with Dad and Junior, right? I tell you with specificity how to make a better scholar in that chapter. I tell you exactly what the underlying problems are in scholarship. Doesn't matter what the subject is. So Dad says to Junior, okay, you figured out you're at level 5. The kid says, yeah, that's where I am. Okay, well, we can move you up to level 4. Really? Yeah, and then you'll do better. Kid's going to want to do that, see? And I tell you in there exactly what to do. The dad just follows the instructions in the chapter. Kid becomes a better scholar.
So your book, each chapter is one scale.
Each chapter is one scale.
Okay.
Right. So, of course, because every person is at some level on every scale is going to have some impact on every other scale. In fact, one of the axioms of the subject, there are 12 axioms of Septemics. One of the axioms is that being high on any scale, meaning at or near the top, is both a cause and an effect of being at or near the top of any other scale. And being at or near the bottom of any scale is both a cause and effect of being at or near the bottom of any other scale.
I think that's the point I was trying to make earlier, like how they're interconnected.
There is some interconnection. So when you have somebody who, for example, Jimmy Page was a heroin addict for years. This is not news. Everybody who pays attention knows that. I'm not knocking.
Hell of a guitar player.
He was a musical genius. Not just his guitar playing, his songwriting. He produced those albums, okay? And when they hit the world, they put everybody to shame. They ruined the careers of other bands. Zeppelin went on tour in 1968. The opening act was Iron Butterfly, who was one of the original heavy metal bands. Okay? So Zeppelin would go out as the opening act. After people heard Zeppelin, they didn't even want to hear Iron Butterfly.
And that was the opener.
They ruined Iron Butterfly on that tour. Everybody who saw that tour ran out and bought Zeppelin albums. They weren't interested in the next Butterfly album. See? So, the man is very high on the scale of human ability. I don't want to give a level, but he's very high on that scale, right? But he must have had something going on, for example, on the scale of equanimity, or he wouldn't have been a heroin addict. See? But again, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that's how people are. So the way to use this to help people is when you see a person having trouble in an area, you pay attention to exactly what's going on. You see what skill is relevant. So we talked about a guy who's 100 pounds overweight. There's the scale of physical fitness. So when a person comes to me for physical training, I observe him, interview him until I know exactly where he is on that scale. And then I know what the next level up is. And so I know what to expect. And I also know what he can do. Because, see, a person who's at sick, which is one of the levels, is going to have a hell of a time working out. He might need to do some acupuncture, some chiropractic, or some Reiki or something, see, to get him to where he's not sick. And then he'll become tired. Well, to me, that's good news because he moved up to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So now we can work on the fatigue. See? Now we're getting him to get a lot of sleep, not overexert himself. And after the tiredness subsides, we can get him up to the next level, which is normal. He's a normal person. He's not sick. He's not exhausted. He's a normal guy. So you can say, now we'll get you a gym membership. And he will be able to do that. You see, he'll be able to go to the gym because he's not sick and he's not exhausted.
But if you get him a gym membership while he's still sick, then you've missed the levels in between and it doesn't work.
Your money.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. You see these people who buy gym memberships, they don't go, they don't get anywhere. They're not up to that. They're at a lower level. So this is very efficacious. And another way of saying that is it's very user-friendly. So going back to a question you asked that I didn't answer, what I tell everyone who asks me about this, my clients and students and friends and such, get the book, study it like a textbook, because that's what it is. It's a textbook on a new subject. So if you were going to take a course in chemistry or physics or math or economics or biology, if you have any brains at all, you would start on line 1 of page 1 and study that. Make sure you understand it. Do we know what this word means? Does this make sense? And then you go to line 2. Right? That's what good teachers do. And I say go all the way through to the end of the book. Just doing that. Then go back, read it a second time, and when you get to each scale, find your level on that scale. And by the time you finish the second reading, you will know your level on 35 scale. Now, each time you found a level, you have insight. So by the time you finish the second reading, you're a new person. You know all kinds of things that you did not know about yourself. And in each case, because you know the correct level, there's the opportunity to move up to the next.
Because you created the gradient.
I'm giving you the gradients. I didn't create them. I just wrote them down.
You organized it.
Right. I observed it. I was like a guy walking along a country road by himself, and he saw a $100 bill. He picked it up, put it in his pocket. That's what I just saw it.
So, okay. So this is amazing, fascinating. What are you just seeing private clients now, or are you teaching this as a subject at a university? I mean, where do you want to take this? Because how do you benefit the most possible, the highest number of people with this new teaching or this new understanding?
Okay. So I was very careful to write this book in such a way that once you have the book, you don't need anything else in order to use it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to take a course. You don't need to join a religion. You don't need to join a club. You don't need to hire a facilitator, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just you and the book. So what has happened is the reaction to this is so overwhelmingly positive that I really kind of have pretty much pushed my practice to the side, and I've done about 275 interviews about this.
Mm.
Because when people see this, they get it. say, well, I'm going to check this out. So there's like a whole growing subculture of people, of septemicists, who get this book, and they're finding themselves on every level. They're finding all the people around them. Now, let me just give you a little more data to show you how big this is.
Okay.
Some of these are what I call general scales, like the scale of basic purpose. It's general. In other words, you find your level and you're done. Now, you can try to move up to the next level, but that's all you can do with this. Or you find your wife's level. She possibly can move up to the next, as opposed to a specific scale. Most of the scales are specific, which means they're context-driven. So we talked before about the scale of motivation. So, what is my wife's motivation toward me? What is my father's motivation toward me? What is my boss's motivation toward me? See, these are different contexts. What is my pastor's motivation toward me? And you're going to find different levels. And each time you do, you have an epiphany. And your relationship with them just improves. Even if the person is a complete jerk, you say, okay, this guy wants revenge against me. That's level 5 on the scale of motivation. That tells you something. You see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives you context for that relationship.
Right. It tells you, what do I want to do with this relationship? So, since you can find the motivation of every person you know, you can use this scale this way. 300, 400, 500 different contexts. Huh? You can even do it on people from your past. Oh, I had that 3rd grade teacher who hated me. Oh yeah, her motivation was this. See? It wasn't level 2, which is duty. See?
There's something else going on there.
Yeah, she was just there for the money, which is level 4. She didn't give a damn about me. She was just getting her paycheck and going home. See? So then you see, okay, now I see what happened there. Now, the other thing about this is you can reverse the vector and say, what is my boss's motivation toward me? What is my wife's motivation toward me? Not what is mine toward them. What is theirs toward? It's a different answer. So you know your motivation, and you know their motivation. So you can use it another 500 times. So you could take that one scale and go through everybody you know, or everybody you've ever known, on 2 vectors, figure this out, and your whole life will change. Because remember, every time you spot this, you're having an insight. Oh, I see what was going on with this person. So, because of the insight factor here, there is what you might call a virtuous cycle. Because every time you correctly spot a level, you have an insight, so you're a little smarter. Now, when you go to the next scale, what is my level on this scale? You're a little bit smarter than you were when you went to the first scale. So it's going to be a little easier to use. And then you spot that one, and you have another insight. So you see, by the time you go through the whole book and you have 35 insights, you're a smarter person at the end of this book.
Sounds life-changing.
It's life-changing. It's a life-changing. Now, it's beyond life-changing. Life-changing could mean a couple of things. You know, taking heroin could be life-changing, but that's not a benefit. This is a life-enhancing activity. So if you use this, your life gets better, period. So I can absolutely guarantee anybody who reads this book and understands it, he will be preventing catastrophes, dilemmas, indictments, bankruptcies, divorces, fistfights, etc., etc., etc. Because all of the downscale people, he will spot them. He will say, this guy's destructive. See, I'm not going to mess with him. I do this all the time. I'll meet some person who will say, this guy's at or near the bottom of this scale. I'm not going to deal with this guy. I don't tell him anything. I don't insult him. I just say, thank you very much. Have a nice day. And I move on. Now, the exact opposite happens too, where you meet people who say, this is an upscale person. This person is high in this scale, high in this scale, high in this scale, high in this scale. This is somebody I want in my life. And I have been using this, and it's infallible. I see one of these people, I don't jump to conclusions. Pay attention. Listen to what the person says. Look at the person's life. And you'll see how this person operates on these. And you say, this is somebody who's going to be an asset to me. And you keep that person in your life. Now, that person is probably going to be high in some skills and low in other skills. So if you know that this person is low on this particular scale, you can tiptoe around it and maintain the relationship without allowing this to screw it up.
Huh. You're socially engineering partnerships, relationships, everything. Yeah.
Right. So, for example, I know a guy, I've known him for many decades. Wonderful guy, smart, family man, made a lot of money. We had a lot of fun. But this guy is a political extremist. It's not so. So, I don't want to lose my relationship with the guy, right? So when politics comes up, I don't say anything. I don't argue with him. I don't say you're an extremist. See?
You know which buttons to push and which ones not to push.
I just go right around it. See? I don't have to agree with him. So we're still friends. Now, I'll tell you something interesting. I have 3 sisters. One of them is a liberal and 2 of them are conservatives. I get along great with all of them equally well. You know why? I don't make it an issue. So in that sense, I'm apolitical. See? So I don't go around telling people who I voted for or anything. Why am I going to do that? How's it going to help anything? See? Keep it to myself.
I'm Canadian. I can't even vote.
So this is very user-friendly.
It seems like a great tool for understanding yourself better, and then also in managing the relationships around you, right?
Right. So, for example, I talked before about a guy is dating somebody. He figures out she's a gold digger. Now, what he does with that is up to him. We're not going to tell him what to do, what not to do. It's none of our business, right? He might say, well, it's true she's a gold digger, but I still love her. And if he has enough money, it's not a problem. But he might say, I'm not married to a gold digger, and break up with her. Now, there might be another guy who doesn't care if she's a gold digger, and he marries her. So have you ever noticed how many rich, ugly, old guys are married to beautiful young women?
That never happens, I swear.
So often I see this couple and I say, this doesn't make any sense. How did this dorky-looking guy with no muscles and glasses get this beautiful woman to marry?
Yeah, we're in Beverly Hills, man. It's everywhere.
How does that? I'll tell you how it happens. You got a 55-year-old guy who's overweight and gray and not too good looking to begin with. And he's married to a 23-year-old beauty queen. The beauty queen gets a Corvette, a credit card, a mink coat, a diamond ring, and a pearl necklace. She's happy. The guy gets a 23-year-old beauty queen for a wife. That's how that works. So she comes to him and says, honey, I want to go to Vegas for the weekend. He says, okay, here's $5,000, have a good time. She doesn't care. He's got plenty of money. So when she comes back, she's grateful. See? He benefits. So it works for him. So you see, there's no judgment on this. There's no right or wrong. It's just, what are the facts?
It's almost like you're statistically analyzing human behavior and not judging it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if you have a garden, but if you did have a garden, you might say, Jim, come over and look at my garden. And I come over and I say, oh, very nice. He's got hydrangeas, he's got peonies, he's got irises, because I know flowers. Okay, I've been involved in gardening. So I'm analyzing this, right? I don't have to think about this. I just see it. I look, oh, that's an iris. That's a rose. That's a tulip. That's a peony, right? So I have this mildly sophisticated appreciation of your garden, and I might actually be able to help you with that. I might say, You don't want to give too much sunlight to these. These, you want to give a lot of sun. These, you want to give a lot of water. These, you want to give. So just by knowing that, I could be an asset to you. Now, if you invite a 5-year-old kid to your garden, he's going to look at it and he's going to see exactly the same thing I see. And you know what he says? These are pretty and they smell nice. That's all he knows. He doesn't know the word hydrangea or chrysanthemum. Now, most people, as regards humans, are like that little kid. They don't know what they're looking at. And that's why we routinely elect idiots and criminals to a political office. We can't see it.
Very timely.
So now, if that kid were to grow up and learn about flowers, and he comes back to your garden 10 years later, he says, oh, yeah, I see you got hydrangeas and chrysanthemums and roses and tulips. He can analyze it. So now, what you think about flowers is not terribly important to most people. I mean, unless you're a gardener, then you're in a lot of trouble because you're supposed to know. But people, it's gigantic. Now, look, when I was a young man, I hadn't discovered this data yet. It didn't exist. So I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes. I got involved with some people I shouldn't have been involved with, and it was a train wreck. So now, that doesn't happen. See? Because when I meet the person, I can analyze this person. So let's say I meet a woman, right? I'm saying, oh, she's at this level on this scale, this level on this scale, this level on this scale. No thanks. That happened to me recently. I met this absolutely gorgeous blonde. Gorgeous. Single blonde. And I started to observe, just from interacting with her, that she was low on many of these. There were very distinct behaviors that I could spot on these scales, and I dismissed her. Okay?
Because you knew she was going to be trouble.
Yes. Now, most guys wouldn't have done that. Most guys would have said, wow, look at this woman. She's interested in me. I'm going for it. I did not make that mistake. So when I dismissed her, she was shocked. You know, beautiful women don't expect men to do that.
No, they expect men to make the same mistake again and again.
Right. And she said to me, who do you think you are? I didn't tell her I'm an expert in Septemics. I just said, no thanks.
Question for you.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do with this? Like, do you want to help people in private practice? Do you want to teach at a university? Do you want to, like, where do you see your role in getting people to adopt this and learn these tools and techniques?
That's why I'm here today. I'm telling you about this. You're going to post this. Okay? And some people are going to see it and say, I'm going to check this out. I mean, it's in hardbound, softbound, and ebook.
Okay, so but that sells a book,
right?
And maybe that person really does read it and understand it and take the time. Maybe they even contact you and ask to meet you or to become one of your clients or something like that. That's probably true.
I'm not looking for clients.
But I'm curious. Like, would you ever approach a university and try to teach this? Because I feel like, or have you had any death threats from the American Association of Psychiatry?
It's somewhere in between the two. I actually did. If you go to my website, you'll see there's reviews. One of the reviews is from an experienced psychotherapist who has a master's in psychology, right? It's a glowing review. And he said to me, Jim, you should go to this group, I don't remember the name of it, and present. Mm-hmm. I was not optimistic about this. I said, okay, we'll see what happens. So I jumped through the hoops, They wouldn't take me. Mm-hmm. You know why? Most people live in a box.
And they don't want to get out of the box.
They don't want to get out of the box. And I'll tell you something else. You have some guy who spent 25 years getting a doctorate in psychology. He doesn't want some guy to come along and say, there's a whole vast body of data about which you know nothing that will totally undercut your subject. He doesn't want to hear that.
And help his clients faster and without him or her.
Right. So I actually mention in the book that nobody has actually come after me yet, but I would not be surprised if eventually somebody does, because that's what happens. So I'm just trying to get the book into the hands of as many people as possible. So at some point, some guy who works at a university might say, we should get this guy in here to teach this.
Yeah.
I'd say, great. How much are you offering? Send me a ticket. Okay? I would do that. And also, there might be some people who say, well, this is great. Will you take me as a client? Okay. But that's not what I'm after. Because while I was being a human development engineer, late in my career, when I was a consummate expert at that, really a virtuoso at it, I thought about, I'm not going to live forever. How many people can I help?
Yeah, that's
thousands, maybe, I would have many clients who would stay with me for a long time. Years would stay with me. So, that's taking up time. I'm happy to help the client. Client keeps improving. I'm going to keep helping them if they want to be helped. But when I realized that I could go from helping by the hundreds, helping by the millions, that's why I spent 25 years writing this book. Because this book, there are 1.5 billion people who can speak English on Earth. I estimate that about 1 billion of them can read this book. Now, I should also tell you that this book is for anyone who can read English reasonably well and wants to improve himself or others. Now, many people make the mistake of thinking everybody wants to improve himself or others, and I'm sorry, that's not true. There are many people who have no interest in improving themselves or others. This would include psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, professional criminals, war criminals, corrupt politicians, drug dealers, etc., etc., etc. There's all kinds of categories of people. Crazy people.
Some just lazy people.
Right. There's a lot of people. And I actually calculated, using this material, approximately 50% of the human race wants to improve himself and or others.
50%. 4 billion people.
Yes.
Roughly, but not English-speaking people. So it's,
right.
Yeah, so now you're down to a couple 100 million.
Yeah, it's about half a billion. So if you know anything about the nonfiction publishing world, if you sell 10,000 copies of a nonfiction book, it's considered a hit.
Bestseller.
So that's what I'm trying to do. If I can get 10,000 people to buy this book, this thing will take off like a prairie fire.
You should do a TED Talk.
I applied to them and I didn't hear back.
It's
the same thing. Now,
because you're going after an existing hierarchy of a way of dealing with human difficulties and emotions and everything like that, and it's probably not going to be. That's even more of why they should let you give that talk.
Right.
Yeah.
So think about this. This, I already know, goes across all demographic lines. This can help people of any sex, any ethnicity, any age, any socioeconomic level, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole list in the book of all the demographics that this cuts across. So there are all kinds of people out there, Buddhists, Taoists, Mormons, Episcopalians, Jews, right? There's all these categories of who could benefit from this.
Everyone.
And they will not benefit from it because it's not part of their Weltanschauung.
Their religious beliefs.
Right. So I don't care if the person is a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim. I hope he reads the book and understands it.
This cuts across all faith and all gender and all ethnicity.
But many of those people prevent themselves from benefiting from it because of their beliefs.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So, for example, if you look at what's going on in the current election, okay, it is a fact that Trump's poll numbers have been going gradually up, 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 up. They're still going up. If you look at yesterday, they're still going up.
Well, yesterday was a tragedy, or 2 days ago, yeah.
So, what's going on there? This guy's been around a long time. He's already been president. People, this is a known quality, okay? People know who this guy is. So, young people are coming to him, leaving the Democratic Party. Women are coming to him. Hispanics, blacks, especially black men. So what's happening? Somehow he's piercing their belief system. Now you can go on YouTube and you can find dozens of videos of some black guy saying, yeah, I've been a Democrat my whole life, but I'm voting for Trump. Take a look. What happened there? Something got through his belief system. He says, we've been poor for generations, and this guy is different. I'm going to give him a shot. You see? So he's undercutting the Democratic Party's constituency. That's what's happening. Now, I'm not telling you who to vote for, or who's good or who's bad. I'm just saying he is breaking down these belief systems. There are a lot of people who didn't vote for him before. When he ran again, did vote for him. He got more votes. And there's way more people now who want to vote for him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's breaking down these barriers. So this is what happens when a new idea proliferates. So historically, for example, the heliocentric theory, which is that the Earth goes around the sun, was propounded about 500 years ago by Copernicus. It's also called the Copernican theory. But most people don't know that the heliocentric theory was first propounded in 300 BC by Aristarchus of Samos, a Greek philosopher. So it took 1,800 years for that to go from, this guy's nuts, to, yeah, this makes sense. 1,800 years.
Well, let's hope this gets adopted a little faster than that.
Let's hope so. But
it'd be nice if you were still around when people could appreciate it.
Well, I have often said, based on what I've been seeing for the last 28 and a half years, most of the copies of this book will sell after I'm deceased. And I'll tell you how I know that. I watched people. Guy gets this book. He says, yeah, this is cool. Then he sees, like I talked about the dad with the son, right? Junior's having trouble. There's a scale of scholarship. Come here, Junior, look at this, right? So now, Junior, instead of getting C's and D's, is getting B's and C's. And he sees, at some point, he's going to say, Dad, what was that book you showed me? Right? That says, here, read it. And so because it's natural law, and the kid is not mentally retarded, he's going to look at it and say, yeah, this is cool.
And it gets handed down generation to generation.
Right. And so then he's going to get into it. So think of it this way. If I gave you a case of champagne, I'm sure you wouldn't drink it all by yourself.
Gone by Sunday night, I promise you.
A couple of things might happen.
Right.
You might invite all your friends over and say, let's have a champagne party and get 30 people over here and kill the case. Right? Or you might say, every time it's a holiday, I'm going to pull one of these out. Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah, it could last a decade.
And when it's on those holidays, you're going to share it with your wife or your buddy or your mother or whoever's around, right? So that's how this book is. People do not keep this to themselves because it's natural phenomenon. So think about the Fibonacci sequence. So there are living organisms that are constructed according to Fibonacci numbers. This is not debatable. You take a sunflower You count the seeds one way, it's a Fibonacci number. You count them the other way, it's another Fibonacci number. How does that work? There's all kinds of pine cones. It's the same thing. So Fibonacci looked at this. He said, what are these numbers that keep repeating in nature? He said, something's going on here. See, that's how you discover something, just as. And he was able to sort of reverse engineer these numbers.
By asking the right question.
Right. What formula would lead to these numbers? See, we know it's got to be 13 and 16 or whatever the numbers are. And so how do we get there? And he figured out there's a pattern. It's actually a very simple pattern. And we now know the Fibonacci numbers to infinity because he gave us the formula. So he came along just as I did and said, there's a pattern here. And he, because he was a brilliant mathematician, figured this out. You know, it's just like Crick and Watson who broke the DNA code. One of those guys was a geneticist. The other guy was a mathematician. He saw patterns. There's a pattern here. What is the pattern? So each of these 35 skills is like a periodic table with a corresponding subject. So the periodic table is, to me, as a serious chemistry student, is beautiful. And it's the backbone of chemistry. Now, before Mendeleev invented the periodic table, there was chemistry. Went on for hundreds of years before him. But he came along and he revolutionized it.
Because he categorized it.
Right. He made it easier to understand, easier to learn, and easier to teach. That is exactly what I did here.
With human behavior.
With human phenomena. It's bigger than behavior. For example, there's a scale of government. I mean, that's sort of human behavior, but it's big. There's a scale of spiritual identity.
These are the group scales.
Spiritual identity is an individual scale.
Government is a group scale, right? Yeah.
So this goes way, because psychology now is defined as the study of behavior. And human psychology, which is what most of us know it to be, is the study of human behavior. So this is bigger than behavior. There's a scale of politics. There's no analog to that in psychology. There's a scale of government. Psychology is a lot involved in relationships, but there's no scale of relationships that covers all relationships. So what I had to do with this is I had to take each of these 35 subjects, and each scale is like a lens. So when you shine white light through a lens, it comes out Biv, 7 colors. So each of these levels is the 7 colors. So the white light going in is, let's say, choice. But there's 7 manifestations of choice.
And you have to identify where you are.
I have identified what they are. So this is what makes it powerful, because if I were to go out on the street here and stop some guy and say to him, what's your wife's motivation toward you? He'd look at me like I was from Mars.
Especially in this neighborhood.
This neighborhood, I might be from Mars. Well, anyway, he would say, how can I know that? There's thousands of motivations. Well, actually, there are only 7. And all the others are subsets of these. So you'll find if you read the book, you'll think about, well, what about this? You'll say, oh, I see, it comes under this one. So it's like the thesaurus. You know, you look up red in a thesaurus, and there's 20 words. Red, scarlet, crimson, and so forth, right? So it's all red. So once I tell him there are only 7 levels, and your wife is at one of these 7 levels, here it is, look at it. He's going to look at it and say, oh, I can see. She's at level 3. Just like that. Now, maybe he has some thing preventing him from doing that. Maybe he's on drugs. Maybe he's drunk. Maybe he's illiterate. I mean, those are people for whom they're not going to benefit from this.
Maybe they don't even care. Yeah.
But most of the people in industrialized society who are not criminal types are going to look at this and say, yeah, I can see this. This is cool. Let me check this out.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is so clear. I'll tell you what happens. About 22 years ago, I'm talking to a buddy of mine. We're just standing around talking about politics and government, like two guys normally would. And I had already come up with the scale of government. And I thought, I'm going to show this to him and see what he thinks. I did not say anything. He didn't even know I was writing a book. So this was in a transcript form. So I opened it up to that page and said, look at this. So he looked at it. And in about 1 second, he pointed. He literally pointed. He says, that's my level. He found his level on that scale without my even suggesting that that's what it was for. That's how easy it is to use. Now, another thing that happens often with this is, guy's reading a certain scale, let's say the scale of choice. And he gets down to a certain level and he says, wait a minute, this is my mother-in-law. This is exactly how she is. Now, I don't know this guy's mother-in-law. I might not even know the guy, right? Most of the people, I'm never going to meet most of these people, right? There's some guy in Canada, some guy in UK, some guy in Australia reading this book. I don't know who they are. But they're going to get down to it and they're going to say, oh, yeah, that's my boss. He's described perfectly here. And the reason for that is it's natural law. The boss is on one of these levels in every scale. And because it's natural law, you're going to spot it. Just like I can look in your garden and say, that's an iris. Every iris in the world is unique. But I can still spot an iris and say, that's not a rose or a tulip, it's an iris. And that's how you use this. It's the same thing.
Amazing. Amazing. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about today as we kind of start to wrap this up a little bit?
Let me just say this.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of these scales is a lens.
Yeah, I see that.
That you can hold up either to yourself in a mirror or to somebody else, right? So, for example, a guy wants to get a close shave, right? He wears glasses, but he doesn't have his glasses on. So he shaves and he misses spots. He can't see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then he puts on his glasses. Oh, I missed the spot, and he fixes it, right? So, or a guy looks at a woman, he says, boy, she's pretty. Then he puts on his glasses. Says, she's not so pretty after I have my glasses on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how this works. It's a lens. So it's so easy to use, and it's so beneficial, it doesn't make any sense to not use it.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's like this. If you take your car out on the road, assuming you have a car, there's all kinds of signage. Stop signs, no left turn, double yellow line, 25 mile per hour around the curve, right? In every jurisdiction that I know of, you have to take a test and show that you know these things before they let you take a road test, right? And you are required by law to obey the signage. You can't just say, well, it says 35, but I can do 50. You get in trouble if you do that. If you do not obey the signage, you're just asking for trouble. Now, there's 100 different types of trouble you can get into. You can kill somebody. You can kill yourself. You can get a ticket. You can have your license suspended, et cetera, right? There's 100 different bad things that could happen. So this book is like the signage. I am telling you where the edge of the road is. I'm telling you, when you go around this curve, 35 miles an hour, how some civil engineer calculated that at some point. And so he was able to actually test the coefficient of friction in the tires relative to the velocity, say, we're going to set this at 35, okay? That's not random. So maybe you can get away with 40. But remember, you can hit an ice patch or an oil slick and go right off the road. So since everybody is at some level on every scale, it's really smart to just get this and use it. And, like I had a girlfriend when I was young. Boy, was that a train wreck. And that went on for a long time. If I had this book, I never would have gotten involved. I would have seen, she's at this level and this level and this.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what I was looking at. All I knew was she's attractive and she wants me, And for most guys, that's enough.
And you avoided the red flags. Or you didn't even, you were colorblind. You couldn't even see the red flags.
I was like that little kid looking at the flowers.
Yeah.
I was 19 when I met this. I was just a college kid, This subject didn't exist.
They should make every 18-year-old read this book before they go off into life.
Right. That's what I said. But as I said, most people are in a box. They don't want to get out of the box. Like, for example, I have many Mormon friends. I read the Book of Mormon. It didn't make me a Mormon. But there's a lot about what they do that I respect. Like they don't use drugs, they don't smoke, they don't drink. I don't do those things either. So when I met more people, and they told me, we don't do any, I said, well, you're just like me. So, but most Mormons would say, well, this is not part of the Mormon religion. I'm not going to do it. See, this is blasphemy or heresy or devil worship or something like that. It's not. It's engineering. So, there are people who think the world is 6,000 years old.
And flat.
There aren't as many of those as who think it's 6,000, but I've met some of these people.
Mm-hmm.
And, coming from my hard science background, I could say, there's something called carbon dating, which is foolproof, which anyone can learn. And we have rocks that have dated at 50,000 years, 100,000 years, 200,000 years. It's not debatable. Okay? Well, there are some people who are going to say, well, he's motivated by Satan or something like that. I don't know, they think. But, Allison, some of those people might say, really? Carbon dating? Yeah, look it up. So they study it. Wow, there's all this scientific evidence. Oh, yeah, and if you study geology, we have these ages. And we know from the rocks. We date the rocks, and they go back millions of years. So some people will say, yeah, could have been made in 6,000 years because this rock is 200,000 years old. And other people will say, no, that's not part of my religion.
I love it. Yeah, putting your eyes up and like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are people like that. So what can I do about that? I feel sorry for them, really. So it's like there are people who you can give them facts and they are just immune to the facts. Like there are a lot of people go around who think Abraham Lincoln was a Democrat. Abraham Lincoln was not a Democrat. He was the first Republican president. Look it up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, that's not true. Republicans are racists. A lot of people say Republicans are racist. Well, some of them are, but there's a lot of them aren't. So somebody who's bright, I could say, here, there's 1,000 books on Abraham Lincoln. Read them. They all say he was a Republican. And the guy might say, I didn't know that. I guess that changes. See?
Well, you can always give people the tools, and it's up to them to apply it and learn from it, right? And some people just don't.
That's why I talked about my experience when I was 10 years old, about being shocked that some kids didn't like school.
Mm-hmm.
I loved school. The only reason I stopped going to school is I was getting old and I had other things to do, you know. If I want to own a house someday, I can't just keep going to school forever, you know. Now, to tell you the truth, if somebody came to me and said, Jim, I guarantee you're going to live another 50 years, I would go right back to school as soon as the semester started. And, you know, it almost wouldn't matter to me what the subject was because I'm interested.
Mm-hmm.
Psychology, great. Languages, great. So I'm kind of at the opposite extreme. Now, if you look at the scale of scholarship, it tells you the bottom of the scale is somebody I call a non-student. He has no business being in that classroom. He doesn't want to learn. He's not going to learn. He's going to disrupt the learning environment. These are the people who drop out of school. These are the people who use school as a place to sell pot and date girls.
Mm-hmm. Or worse.
Or worse, start fistfights.
Mm-hmm. Intimidation,
right.
Yeah, bullying, all this kind of shit.
So my thought is, that guy shouldn't be in there. He's disrupting the learning environment for the other 28 kids who do want to learn.
On the scale of scholarship, he's a 7.
Right. And so all the scales have things like that, very specific things. So once you get this data, it opens your eyes. That's why I say it's revolutionary. You see the world in a different way. Like before I saw the periodic table, I don't know how old it was, maybe 12, 13, when I saw it, I said, wow, this changed my whole concept of chemistry. See, before that it was, well, I know there were certain chemicals, but it was nebulous. And then this brought the whole thing into focus.
Yeah, organizing the information, it allows you to really get a hold of it and learn from it, and then use it as a consistent resource, right? When the information is just floating around and it's not organized, it's hard to access it again or to learn from it because it hasn't been put in an organized way. And that's exactly what you've done with human phenomenon, human behavior.
Right. So, for example, when I was young studying physics, first you study mechanics, then you study electronics. That's standard physics.
I didn't do any physics, but I'll trust you on that.
Okay. So I haven't touched on the theory of relativity in either of those subjects. So when I finally got around to studying theory of relativity, the whole explanation of gravity is different. The whole explanation of matter, energy, space, and time is different. The whole explanation of that the speed of light in a vacuum is constant for all frames of reference. That's counterintuitive. Okay? But when you understand it, so now that I understand the theory of relativity, my whole view of the world changed. So now I know if you are traveling fast, time moves slower for you. They have proven this. They took 2 atomic clocks that were calibrated together at the same time. They put one on a jetliner, flew it around the world, and when it came back, it had slowed down a little. It lost a tiny amount of time. But if you study the mathematics of relativity, it's all in there.
It makes sense.
You can see that it's possible to fit a 40-foot ladder in a 20-foot garage if it's going fast enough, because it gets stumped.
Condensed.
Right. So if you had a spaceship fly through a barn close to the speed of light, you could have a 50-foot spaceship fit into a 30-foot barn. There would be a short period of time when it was, how could that be? It's because time dilates. So I'm just giving this as an example. Once you understand the phenomena, and he explained it beautifully, everybody now in the physics world knows this. And the whole idea, we have a concept now called space-time,
Mm-hmm.
which didn't exist before. 100 years, there was no such word. 100 years ago, there was no such word as space-time. Now it does, because Einstein said there's something called space-time. Because the amount of time you have is relative to the amount of space you have. I mean, when you move through space, that's a measurement of space. So if you're going quickly, that's a measurement of time. They lock together. So he proved that energy, matter, space, and time are integral components of one another. That was an entirely new concept.
Because they were all probably studied separately previously.
Right. People thought, well, there's space and things move through space and time is moving at the same rate no matter what. Well, they were wrong. And we know. So that's sort of what happened here, but with human phenomena, where I saw this data, I studied it, I verified it, and when I realized this could really help people, I wrote the book. And after working on it for 25 years, I said, I could keep working on this, because if you've ever written a book or created anything,
It's hard to stop.
that's always true.
Yeah.
You know?
It's never perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
Never, nothing is perfect. So I said, well, I'm not going to live forever. This works. I'm going to release it. And I was really pleasantly surprised at how much people love this. You know, people don't just like this. They love it. I have a host who I did a presentation like this. He is now having me do a separate podcast for each scale.
That's interesting.
And then the axioms of Septemics, which are not in the book, are going to be another. So there's going to be 37 podcasts. So it's like a complete course in Septemics.
That's very smart. Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting. You'll have the chance to. Is it just going to be hosted by you, or is the other?
No, there's. I'm just a guest.
Oh, but you're going to do a deep dive into
I'm
each.
doing it. I'm doing it in the middle of this. You know,
That's amazing.
like every Monday I see this guy. We do another scale.
That's wonderful, because that's a very accessible way to get into this, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So somebody who looks into this and says, "Hey, this is cool," and then he finds this guy who's telling him, Jim does a separate podcast on each scale. They're going to say, wow, I'm getting it right from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
So, and I have to tell you, this host, every week, he's just blowing out. He says, wow, I studied the scale this week. It like changed my whole way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm giving you natural law that wasn't there before. So
You're letting people see for the first time. Yeah.
And my motto is, your success is my reward.
Mm-hmm. You're taking the blinders off, really, because like everyone's just got their blinders on, right? Like we're all, like you said, we're all stuck in the box. Some people don't want to get out.
That's
Some
right.
people can't see or know how to get out, and these are the tools to get out.
And of course, the people who propound these various subjects are not going to want this to proliferate.
No, of course not.
So, for example, you have somebody who's like a Catholic priest. He says, this is not in the Bible. This is the work of Satan.
Blasphemy.
Right. And if you study the history of Christianity, wow, is it scary?
Yeah, they burn people like you.
They burned their own people. And the only offense was the guy disagreed with them.
Or was speaking something that wasn't in the Bible.
That's disagreeing with them.
Yeah.
So,
Organized religion.
that's still going on.
Yeah.
That's still going on. I mean, it's like, I know a lot of Jewish people. I have a lot of Jewish friends, close Jewish friends, okay? I'm from New York.
Mm-hmm.
Millions, okay? My next door neighbor, when I was growing up, was Jewish. And you got crazy people who go around, kill the Jews, kill. What are they thinking?
Mm.
So, of course, it's true that there are some bad Jews, but there are mostly good ones.
There's bad people everywhere.
That's right.
Yeah. Every ethnicity.
That's right. Every ethnicity, every religion. One of my areas of expertise is theology. So I know many theologies. But the one I know best is Christianity, because I was raised in the United States. And I can tell you that I am criticized by many people for not being a Christian. And I'm criticized by an equal number of people because I'm a Christian. Now, how can that be?
It's the beauty of the United States.
It's just looking at
it.
Yeah. I mean, I've had people who said, well, I don't want to work with you. You're not a Christian. And honestly, I'm being perfectly frank. I know Christianity better than most Christians. I can quote the Bible verbatim from memory. Okay? And I actually do often. I'll be talking to someone and I'll just quote something. So, but I don't belong to any church. You might say I belong to all the churches. Because my way of approaching life is not no, but it's yes and.
Yeah. I feel like I've adopted that kind of philosophy a little bit over all of my travels all around the world and living in different countries and adopting different ways of life and things like that. And I think it just makes you more accepting, right? You're just putting less boundaries on your own knowledge.
That's right. Because, I have many Jewish friends who are wonderful people, beautiful people. I also know some Jews who are really bad people. Bernie Madoff. He went to prison, right?
He stole a lot of money.
Right. So that's being able to just look and see what's there, And unfortunately, a lot of people can't do that. A lot of people are, you might say, propagandized, or their belief is so intense that they can't look at something
objectively.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I've been meditating for 40 years. Every day when I meditate, I find out something new. Somehow I get on to my third grade teacher. I remember what she did. It was upsetting. And I have an epiphany about it, So it's like I keep looking at things, and I didn't see it then, but I see it now. So that's sort of what my life is about. And that's
critical analysis.
And that's, if you are able to look, you will see that this makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that everybody is going to equally understand every scale the same, because remember I said, if a person is at or near the bottom of a scale, it's because he lacks insight in that area. So, for example,
but one of your axioms is also that if they're at the bottom of a scale in one scale, that could also correlate to them being in the bottom of a scale in another.
Cause and an effect.
Right.
There's some interrelation. But for example, Bill Clinton, everybody knows, who's been paying attention for the last 30 years, he's a smart man. Right? He was a Rhodes Scholar. You ever listen to him speak?
Brilliant speaker.
He's smart. Okay? I'm not saying that I voted for him or you should vote for him. I'm just saying he's a smart man. Okay? I don't say who I vote. But I look at a YouTube video. Yeah. This guy, he thinks. Somebody asks him a question. He thinks. He doesn't give you some pat response. I don't say, well, if you look at it this way, it's this. And if you look at it that way, like Jack Kennedy when he famously said, think about how the Russians look at this. One of the reasons they killed him is that he was behind the scenes trying to make peace with Khrushchev. The aerospace companies didn't want that. They would have lost trillions of dollars.
Building missiles.
Right. That's one of the groups that was behind his assassination. So, that's a smart person. Now, he was anti-communist. I don't know if you know. He was as much anti-communist as Nixon was.
But he had a different approach to solving that problem.
Yeah. And I'm not knocking either one of them. They were both smart men. But they had different personalities. So now, Jack Kennedy, we all know, was fooling around with every beautiful woman he could get his hands on.
Famously Marilyn Monroe.
Right. And a lot of other women whose names I know and Jackie had to have known about it because she was a smart woman. She was not a bimbo, right? And somehow who knows what went on behind the scenes? Maybe she said, well, as president of the United States, I'm not going to make a mess. Now, Bill Clinton, everybody who's been around for the last 30 years knows he's a serial abuser of women. I'm not revealing anything here. I mean, there's thousands of articles about it. All kinds of women sued him. Okay? That's how he wound up getting impeached. Because he went on the stand and he perjured himself and he suborned perjury. And those are the two things that got to the Senate for the trial of impeachment. Now, if he were smart, he would have said, here's $100,000, honey, take I.
Right? That's Trump style.
That's right. He's smarter on that subject. So what I'm saying is, if you said to me, Jim, Bill Clinton's going to be here, would you like to come over? I'd say I'll be there in a New York minute. I would love to talk to Bill Clinton, right? But if I had a sister or a daughter, I would say to them, don't go out with Bill Clinton.
He's definitely a level 6 or 7 on a few of your scales.
So I'm not giving any levels. I'm just saying, clearly on the scale of human ability, he's high in his area of expertise. Clearly on the scale of sexuality, he's low without giving any levels. Everybody knows this. So it's just, now, if you showed him the scale of sexuality, he would have trouble with it. See? He would have trouble comprehending that scale, using that scale, benefiting from that scale. Now, for example, if you take some dumb thug who's in organized crime and you give him this book, he's not going to read this book. He'd say, take a hike.
He doesn't want to get out of his box.
That's right. He doesn't want to get out of his box. And also he's going to say, is it going to help me to make more money? Well, maybe. Well, I'm not interested. See? Now, if somehow you could get this thug to read the book, he wouldn't understand it because he's at or near the bottom of all these skills. That's why he's a professional criminal. This would make no sense to him, he'd say. I don't get this.
But if you want to be an active member of society or someone who's putting positivity back into society, then this is something that can benefit you.
Or even just your own life.
Yeah.
So, if that's why not everybody is going to have the same reaction to all the scales. So, let's say you're going through the book and you come to a scale and it's not making sense to you. Skip over it. Go and analyze all the other scales. Because remember I said, every time you find a level, you have an insight. So you're a little bit smarter. So you might come back to that scale a year later and say, now I see this. So that's a good way to use it, or a good way to get another person to use it.
Oh, it's like a guidebook.
Yes. I have one of the hosts who went through all of these scales with me. In other words, we not only did a general podcast, but podcasts on every scale.
I love that. It's such a good idea.
This guy, I didn't suggest this. He carries this book around with him.
Great.
Every place he goes.
Can you name the name of the podcast where we can watch you and him go through all the different scales? Is it public yet?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the guy who's doing a separate podcast for each scale, which is where you really get a full in-depth explanation from the author. His name is Peter Deeds.
Deeds.
Deeds. And his podcast is called Transcendent Minds.
Oh, cool.
So, we're about 2/3 of the way through the book. Because, it takes a while to go. It takes 37 weeks. And some weeks we miss, it's Christmas or whatever, he's sick or whatever. So, eventually, they'll all be out there, and you can go to Transcendent Minds, and they'll be there.
That's a fantastic resource.
Yeah. So, for example, let's say you're studying this, and you say, I'm not getting this scale of belief.
Hey, you can listen to you explain it on a podcast.
That's right. You
Yeah.
can find out the one that's got the scale of belief. And I spend an hour talking about that scale. So, and of course, answering Peter's questions because it's a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What about this? What about this? And do I understand this correctly that you mean this? No, I don't mean that. I mean that. So, it really goes into it. So more and more, I'm doing this with multiple people. So I'm at different points of progress with different hosts because, they all have their own schedule. But I'm willing to do it with anybody who wants to do it because my mission is to get this into the hands of as many people as possible.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people could really benefit from looking at their own life and the relationships around them using this lens, like you said.
That's right. And the truth is, I cannot imagine a human situation that is not benefited by this book. In other words, if you're having trouble with your business, if you have trouble with your wife, if you have trouble with your studies, if you're having trouble with your finances, whatever it is, if it has something to do with humans, this book.
Mm-hmm.
Because I already know this from 28 years of watching this. There is no human situation which cannot be analyzed by one or more of these.
And that's the connection to the natural law that you mentioned.
Right, because it's natural law.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a situation, you might not get the right one right away. You might look at the scale of relationships and say, well, that doesn't really. Then you look at the scale of allegiance. Oh, now I see the scale. So you have to find the one that really works for you, that hits the nail on the head. But I can tell you already, because I've been watching this for 28 years, most problems, dilemmas, situations, difficulties can be analyzed by more than one of these skills.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I talked about, you have some guy who's having relationship problems, show him the scale of relationships. Then you show him the scale of sexuality. Then show him the scale of allegiance. I could keep doing this and come up with maybe a dozen different scales. They're going to help that guy. So by the time he goes to a dozen scales, finds his level and or his significant other's level, he's going to have a greatly enhanced understanding. He's going to see what's going on. And he might be able to go to his wife or his girlfriend or whatever and say, listen, here's what I figured out about this. And she might say, yeah, I never thought about that. See? And they're off to the races. So it's usually more than one skill.
Identifying the problem is the key to taking the first steps forward, right? And making the changes that you need.
Right. So this is something that engineers use every day, right? Somebody brings me an amplifier, says my amp is not working. I don't assume there's only one thing wrong. So I pull all the tubes out of it, if it's a tube amp, and I check them all. Here's a bad one. Put it in. Now let's see how it works. Still not working. Okay, let's check the fuse. Check the power supply. There's like 100.
Just scale until you get the one that works.
And eventually you get the right thing and now it's fixed. So he writes it up for the client. How to fix this, how to change the condenser, how to put in a new tube, how to change the power supply. That'll be $300 your amp works. Okay, so that's what engineers do. I'm just giving you a cookbook for your life.
That's a nice way to describe it. A cookbook for your life. Yeah. So what's the name of the book again?
The name of the book is Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
And your full name?
Jim Marshall.
And your website?
My website is septemics.com. Septemics.
I'll link all that to the
where
podcast.
You can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written. You can read the reviews. You can read sections of the book itself. And there's a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics that you can listen to, where the author explains the subject to a new person in 15 minutes.
I love that. Yeah, you're keeping it quite tight and nuanced, right?
Right. So for some people might say, well, what do I care what the reviews are? I maybe paid for them, you know? But then you go and you listen to it and you say, oh, this makes sense. This is logical.
Well, this conversation has been incredibly enlightening. I think, like you've brought me from 0 to 100 in 2.5 hours, and yeah, I mean it's a very logical dissection of human phenomenon, human behavior.
Right.
Yeah.
So what you have to realize is that every scale is unique. You cannot infer anything about scale 2 by studying scale 1. And that is why it covers all of human phenomena. Because by virtue of the fact that each scale is unique, we're spreading out across human phenomena. So you might have some situation that's not touched on by this scale, but it's touched on by this one.
35 scales, 7 levels.
Right. 35 scales, 7 levels. So basically what you're getting is human phenomena through the mind of an engineer.
That's a nice way to look at it. And that's something that hasn't been done enough because engineers aren't supposed to do that. They're supposed to do other things.
I don't think it's been done by anybody.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not knocking anything that's out there, you know. There's a million things out there, all kinds of psychologists and groups and things, and most of them do good work, you know. So this is not a substitute for therapy. It's not a substitute for religion. It is a book that clarifies human phenomena in a way where I am telling you the scales are correct. I know they're correct, same way I know the Pythagorean theorem is correct. The formula for the volume of a sphere, I know what it is, and I know it's correct. You cannot talk me out of it. If you study math, when you get to solid geometry, and you study that formula, you say, oh, yeah, this makes sense, this is correct. So that's pretty much what I've been doing with this. And I just took all this engineering, all of these semesters of math and physics and chemistry and engineering and everything else, and I used that approach on human beings, and it worked. Now, most engineers wouldn't be able to do that because they don't know all these. Like, for example, I studied philosophy.
Well, this is the key. Your cross-disciplinary education is the key that unlocks this for your brain and allows you to share it with other people.
Right.
Yeah.
So I studied the Socratic dialogues. There's a whole bunch of them. And it's really clear if you read them, all of them, what Socrates was doing. In other words, he had a way, Plato, his student, is telling us that Socrates had this way of asking questions. What about this? How do you define that? Oh, really? Well, what about this?
I have a question for you, totally unrelated. It's a bit of a tangent. Do you think that the lack of cross-disciplinary expertise among engineers today could lead us to like major problems? I'm just thinking around like AI, right? Like you have all these engineers programming these AI computers that are supposed to think for us and help us with our daily tasks and maybe even be sentient someday and actually have like be able to communicate with us. But you have all these engineers that didn't study philosophy, that didn't study psychology, that didn't study theology and all this stuff. And I'm just wondering, like, things are getting so big and so important now, and having all these highly specified people doing all these highly specified things, I feel like they have huge blinders on.
That's right.
To issues that could really cause major problems in the future.
It's not could. It's happened already. If you study history, every time there was a major advance in technology, people said, well, this will be the end of war. I mean, when they first started making weapons out of iron, the people who didn't have iron weapons, they were defenseless.
Yeah, you can't go to war with a wood sword.
they would have a bronze sword, and a guy with an iron sword would hit it. The sword would break.
Mm-hmm.
He kills the guy. So, obviously, they're wrong. It didn't end war, did it? Same thing with the crossbow. When the crossbow was invented, they said, this is so awesome. This will end war. Didn't end war. Yeah, a lot of guys with longbows got killed, but eventually everybody got the crossbow. Then they got to firearms.
Yeah, machine gun.
Gunpowder. You see? It's human frailty is what this is. But you have people who think, well, this is going to, now that we've got nuclear weapons, it's so horrible that it can't happen. Oh, really? What about Hiroshima and Nagasaki? What about Chernobyl? Right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I look at some of these rulers, ding, ding, here comes the wagon. You know, these are crazy people. So. Yeah.
And they have nuclear weapons.
Some of them do. So look, Hitler was developing advanced weaponry. He was developing the V-2 rocket that could reach the United States. If he hadn't been taken out when he was, he would have been bombing New York the same way he was bombing London, right? So eventually he would have gotten to nuclear weapons. So, you know, engineers figuring things out.
In a vacuum.
That's been happening all along. I mean, Galileo, he paid a lot of money inventing weapons for these rich leaders, you know, who paid him to develop these so that they could defeat their enemies, you know. He made a lot of money doing that. I mean, he did many things because he was a polymath. But, so the concern you have is not that it might happen. It's happened, and it's still happening, and it's going to happen.
But it's so nice to see someone who is as multidisciplined, has had such a multidisciplinary background in education as you, and then you've put it all together to create this thesis.
Right.
Yeah. Like I appreciate that. Like I think that's a noble use of time. It's you're giving something back, right? And I think that there's just not enough people like you out there who are looking at these issues from so many different angles.
Right. Well, the truth is, I'm a polymathic intellectual. There are very few polymaths. Jefferson was a polymath. Erasmus was a polymath. And if you go back into ancient history, all of the people that we call philosophers, like Aristotle, he was a polymath.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a time in my life when I said, I'm a philosopher. But then I realized it's bigger than that. I'm a polymath. So then I thought of myself as a polymathic scholar, which was supported by the fact that I'm studying law, I'm studying religion, I'm studying history, I'm studying political science. I was polymathic. Then after a while, I came to realize I'm a polymathic intellectual. Actually, I became an intellectual in prep school because I had a Jesuit education. They're world famous for their education. And they made me an intellectual, although I was not smart enough to figure it out at that time because I was 17 when I left the Jesuits. But I was already an intellectual. I had that that personality, frame of mind. So then when I went into college, I was just like a vacuum cleaner, absorbing all this stuff. So, I'm sitting in class one day. I can't remember what class it was. And there's a pretty girl next to me. She looked kind of Eurasian, a little Asian. And of course, like every other college kid, I was interested in college girls. So she said to me, we started talking, and I was pretty good at that. And she said, you know anything about Buddhism? I said, well, not really. She said, well, would you like to come to a prayer meeting? I said, okay. Well, I went to the prayer meeting because I was interested in this girl who was very pretty. But so I get to this, so she took me to this Buddhist temple, and there's, I don't know what was going on. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a Buddhist temple. And then she took me to a prayer meeting. It was like 1,000 people there. It was unbelievable. It was like a strange experience. Something was going on in that room that I had never experienced before. I didn't know what the hell it was.
And you did a deep dive into Buddhism.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So when you study Buddhism, you find out that, the original Buddha was a Hindu. Really? So I study Hinduism. Then I kept meeting people who were into these things. Like had a friend who was a Buddhist. So we got along great, and, that was like his thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like many people, he was kind of trapped in it. That was it. He didn't want to hear about anything else.
There's no room for any other questions.
Right. For example, in Hinduism, Buddhism, and many other religions, they believe in reincarnation. Well, there's a place in the Bible where Jesus said to them, "Who do they say to you I am?" And the guy says, "Many say you are Elijah, return." That's reincarnation. But if you say reincarnation to a Christian, they hold up the cross.
Yeah. But all these religious texts is borrowed and stole from other religions and from other, so it's all cross-pollinated.
That's right. It's all cross-pollinated. And the more you study history and all these other subjects you see these things. I mean, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, that's from the Code of Hammurabi.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the Jewish Bible. So, the more you study these things, the more you see this is true.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that's how my mind works. There is no clear defining line between chemistry and physics. Take it from me. There's no clear defining line between biology and chemistry. All of the different branches of math all bleed into one another. And, I took 26 semesters of math, and as I went forward, it all became one thing in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So when you study geometry, you study the Pythagorean theorem. So I'm in pre-calculus, and I get a problem and say, well, I can solve this problem with the Pythagorean theorem. Done. So, it's all together. It's all one thing. That's what polymathy is. And that's one of the things that makes me a weirdo, because I'm not locked into any one school. So, I have friends who are Buddhists, friends who are Hindus, friends who are Jews, friends who are Reformed Jews, friends who are conservative Jews, and friends who are Hasidic Jews. Even in there, they're separated.
But that allows you to pick on different pockets of information and ethnicity and religion and things that you've been exposed to and pools of knowledge to solve any problem.
Right. But the thing I really like about it is these people are all my friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to say, you have a lot of anti-Semitic people. I don't want to go around that guy. He's a Jew. My math teacher, I had a math teacher who was brilliant in junior and senior high. He made me a mathematician. I give him full credit for that. Before that, I was just a smart kid who got good grades. But he made me a mathematician. So I was with this guy for 2 years. We lived in the same area. I got to know him. It turned out he was anti-Semitic. He probably was a Nazi, just from reading between the lines. Well, I grew up around Jewish people in New York. So, he said, where do you live? I said, by King's Highway. He said, there's a lot of Jews around there. I said, yeah. And then I realized later, Semitic. He was like, he was casting aspersions. I was just so dopey, I didn't even know what anti-Semitic meant. I don't think I even heard the word at that point. Yes, it's true, there's a lot of Jews in that area, and most of them were friends of mine. And, I had a lot of Catholic priests who were friends of mine. Friends. We would sit around and shoot the breeze. Go to things together. Go to the World's Fair, go to a ball game, And so that didn't prevent me from having friends who were agnostics, having friends who were atheists. So all of this benefited my life.
Yeah, the whole yes and mentality. Yeah.
Like I lived in a guy's house once. I rented a room in his house, and he was Jewish. You know, he always had his yarmulke on, and you could tell that he was probably not Reformed. He was probably conservative Jew. And we got along great, you know, great. So I hope people will be open to natural law. You know, you don't have to be Jewish to be an accountant, but there's a lot of Jewish accountants. You don't have to be Jewish to be a doctor, but there's a lot of Jewish doctors. But there's also a lot of Islamic doctors. So I don't divide up people like that.
Well, the world would be a better place if people didn't.
And I'll tell you why. I had a friend who, in some ways, we were very different, but we rooted for the same baseball team our whole lives. So our whole relationship from when we were kids was talking about this baseball team. Our whole lives. So that was like, hey, did you hear how the Yankees did? Yeah, they lost a tough one. So that was like a big part of our relationship. So I know for a fact that there were things about me he did not like.
But he stuck to the baseball.
We both stuck to the baseball, you see?
Yeah.
Because we were both kind of congenial people with a positive attitude. So we'd laugh together, we'd tell jokes together, we'd go places, we'd go to baseball games together. And so the fact that he didn't like the fact that I had long hair. You know, I used to have long, when it was in style, I had long hair. It's out of style now, so I don't have it anymore. But he always had the same haircut. You know, those people have the same haircut. They have a haircut when they're 18, and when they're 60, they have the same haircut.
I've seen it.
I think that's weird.
Yeah.
You know, how does that work? You know, or like a lot of people in the 70s grew a mustache. I was one of them. Well, then in the 80s came, mustache was red. I shaved.
I don't know. Tom Selleck did a lot for the mustache in the 1980s.
Okay. But so now I have friends who still have a mustache.
They were big Magnum PI fans, I bet.
But, you know, I don't say anything. You know, I don't say, you know, those sideburns went out 30 years ago. I had a good friend who, you know, he grew sideburns in the 60s, and he had them for the rest of his life until he died, which was just a few years ago. And I thought...
And he owned that look.
And it's like, I'm sure it's just that he was not part of the flow, you know?
Or he just found something that worked for him and he stuck with it.
Well, he was a very good-looking guy. He would have looked better without those sideburns. And I just thought he looked ridiculous because, yeah, in the 70s they were great, but in 2000, nobody had those sideburns. So
he aged out of the sideburns.
Anyway, that's like somebody who is not looking at the world.
Yeah.
You know?
Not rolling with the changes and the way that things are evolving.
So there was a time when the 80s came around and I saw, new wave, you know, the musicians looked different and, all right, so I cut my hair. And I had sort of a, you know, new wave kind of a haircut, you know, and that kind of went out. Like if you look at Jerry Seinfeld, you see the same thing. He had that, you know, that haircut from the 90s, and now he's got the haircut from now. That's like normal, you know? That's normal. So if you watch people over there like Johnny Carson, you know, he made it big in the 50s. He had a 50s haircut. And then he was on TV for 40 years, and you could see his hairstyle change.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Yeah. Stay in with the times.
Right. That's part of being in show business. So I hope people can say, okay, this guy's not a Mormon, he's not a Jew, he's not a Muslim, but he's got something here that works.
Well, you're a scientist at the core of your everything you do and every problem you look at. And I think this is you use your scientific method and your mathematic brain to categorize human behavior and human phenomenon and to give people the tools to identify where they are on these spectrums or levels, and then be able to also look at the world around them using this guidebook.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's genius. I mean, this is exciting. I mean, this is, yeah. I mean,
To tell you the truth, I think it would be more accurate to say I'm an engineer.
An engineer, right?
I'm not really a scientist, and I'll tell you why. The mindset, the personality, the skill set of a scientist and engineer are different.
Engineers are problem solvers?
Yes. The ultimate product of a scientist is a theory. The theory of evolution, the theory of relativity.
But you're trying to make it practical.
The end product of an engineer is something that works.
Which this does.
Right. Whether it's an iPhone, a bridge, a car,
or a way
refrigerator,
or a way of categorizing human behavior.
Right. The truth is, the world that we live in today, all of us in industrialized society, is a world created by engineers.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can deny that.
Right.
Except the way we look at human behavior.
You know, I had a very close friend in prep school, and he eventually went on to become a physicist. That was never a doubt in my mind. This guy, in anything like physics, math, chemistry, he got like 99. Anything else, like English or history, he struggled. He would ask me for help. I would help him with his English, with his Latin, and with his whatever. So his personality was completely different from mine.
Because he didn't have a wide spectrum of knowledge that he was interested in.
Yeah, he had the mind of a scientist. You could see this was a budding physicist. He went to college. I went into engineering. He went into physics. And we were both right.
Yeah.
And you could see in our personalities, you know, like he had like the long sideburns and that type of pork pie hat, you know, like, what do they call it? Hipster, like a hipster look.
Yeah, these days they're hipsters, right?
Like you'd look at this guy and you say, this guy looks like a scientist, you know. He was kind of dorky, you know. He couldn't hit a ball, you know. I was very different from that. I was on the baseball team, the football team. I was an engineer, you know. At engineering school I went to, there were 2,000 students. Okay? We had our own building.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all very much alike. You could see it's like, I fit in someplace.
Mm-hmm.
Because scientists are weird people.
I can agree with that.
You know, like a guy spends 20 years in a lab trying to isolate a protein, you know, and he finally does. Yep.
One of my best friends is trying to recreate or create artificial meniscus for the knee to help people with their knee injuries and could make it a non-surgical solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very funny guy.
Yeah. And so, you know, one of the things I noticed when I was young, by the time I was in prep school, I realized I had to have separate groups of friends. I had one group of friends with whom I would go to math and science lectures recreationally. I had another group of friends with whom I would go to plays and poetry reading. I had another group of friends with whom I would play sports. I had another group of friends with whom I would play music.
I think that's super healthy because I don't think you can put the pressure on someone to like all the things you like or to be so multidisciplinary.
Right. So what I realized, these people hated one another. Like I had this friend of mine, you know, we would go to see like ancient Greek tragedies acted out. Like they would take Aeschylus and do the play, you know, that's like classical literature. And we would go and love it, you know, and we would read the book. So, and then I had this other friend who I told you about, who was like a science whiz. These two guys couldn't even talk. And it's like, get this guy away from me. And they were both close friends of mine.
Yeah.
You know, I was in the math club. I was also on the football team. I was the only guy from the football team in the math club.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in this room, there was about 30 of us. We would get together once a week and do math for fun. You know, we had a teacher who was a math teacher who would come in once a week and he would show us things, you know. And We loved it. And if you looked around this room, the other guys in this room were either skinny guys with glasses or pudgy guys who looked like they never did a push-up in their lives. And I was this jock. I was a muscle-bound football player. I'm sure they looked at me and said, what's this guy doing in here? He doesn't belong in here. You know, I stuck out. And there's a picture of the math club. And you can see it's like I look completely different from all these, because I was an athlete, serious athlete. And that's just how I was my whole life. So that eventually led me to this.
I love that. I love that. Jim, we just hit the 3-hour marker.
Great. It's fun talking to you.
What if we can just give everyone here one last crack at this in a kind of a great little soundbite, like what would you tell them? How is this going to change their lives?
Go to Septemics.com. There is more than enough information there to tell you what it is. More than enough. And it's free, and you'll find it interesting. And probably if you go through everything on the site, you'll wind up buying the book. And I hope you do, because it will make your life better. And that is what I want. I will never know about it, but that is my intent.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Jim.
My pleasure.
So now we can go up here and we can show people we're in the same room, because we don't do Zoom calls. It's great to meet you, and thank you so much for explaining all that to me.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, wonderful.
What?